Beyond these pages lies a world of gods, monsters, betrayal, and impossible power.
Magic school test is about to begin. Students from every class were gathered on the same training field. The mission was simple: activate the visible zone and form a protection shield. Romney, the teacher in rank 6, showed her level of power by creating a magic zone with a precision that nobody could imitate. She manipulated her magic in several ways: defense, attack form, cross form, detached form. The dream of every student from the weaker classes is to one day reach her level. Then it was the newcomer's turn. No noble family, no treated. Place in class 7, the weakest class in the academy. All the students from the other classes had heard the rumors that he couldn't use any magic at all. When he stepped to the center and pulled off the defense form, everyone figured it was just luck. But when he did the attack form and the cross form, everyone was stunned because only students from the top classes can do that. But then he pulled a surprise. He tried to pull off a form that only sets class students can do, and everyone around him couldn't believe he was actually attempting the zone of deviate form. But the magic failed before taking shape, and everyone burst out laughing, whispering that a commoner would never pull off something that took years to learn. "What did you say?" The boy stood still for a few seconds and then tried again. This time the energy grew so fast that it exploded in a way nobody expected. On the first day of training, the boy formed a shield with 144 facets, a structure that advanced students spent months trying to create. Everyone started wondering who this boy was, and if he was really a commoner, but what they didn't know is that he wasn't born into a commoner family, who had just been raised as one. Because when he was still a baby, he was abandoned in a barn, where a man found him and raised him as his own son. That child grew up with the name Arian Shiren, and he had only one dream: to learn magic. His father, Arian Vincent, one day took him for the first time to the city of Tormia Creus. While his father handled business, Shirin went to a bookstore to try reading a magic book, but the shopkeeper threw him out the moment she realized he was a commoner. Everywhere he went, he was chased down and kicked out of the city. Pretty quicker, though, he managed to escape and hide from the Ikoris. Shirin came out of hiding to grab a shoe that had fallen off, when he heard a word that caught his attention: magic. He pressed his ear against the wall and listened to a magic lesson happening on the other side. When the boy wondered if he would ever become a mage, the old man answered inside his mind that if he wants it, he can do it. The boy was in shock, not understanding how the mage had sensed him. In that moment, the boy made the decision that would change his life forever. When he reached the top of the wall, Shiren froze because it was the first time that would say to Magic Academy the mage. When the mage called everyone to class, he didn't think twice. He just jumped over the wall and walked in with the other students. This mage is Mary Alpheus, director of a magic school and a 4th-rank mage. The MC begged him to show some magic, since he had never seen any. Alpheus was moved and put on a demonstration. He lifted all the students into the air with wind magic. Shirin was living a dream. When Shirin started falling, he was shaking so hard with fear that everyone burst out laughing. But he didn't tear, because he just experienced something he'd never imagined possible. But hat wasn't he nut? Now the MC wants to learn how to cast magic. The old man explains that it's complicated, but Shiren kept pushing until a demonstration happened. A student performed the spirit zone, and asked how many stones he had in his closed hand. The girl answered 6, and the MC saw that she was right. The old man explains that you need to concentrate as hard as possible, until your mind expands and you can feel everything around you as if it were part of yourself. Shiren tried it right then and there. As you're focusing, trying wild, you open his eyes and sees the earlier sirens. The old man says that was expected, and walked away thinking the boy had failed, but Shiren knew he had pulled it off. On his way back to his father, he bumped into a group of bullies. Just when he was about to get beat up, a girl appears like an angel sent from heaven to save him. But what he didn't expect is that this girl was worse than those bullies, and left him getting beaten up anyway. After being used as a punching bag, this little devil of a girl walked up to him and said she was going to use him as a slave. Well, everyone was laughing. The MC was terrified. "No, God, please, no, no!" It was in that moment that everything in his mind and everything around him started to freeze as if it had come alive. Shireen entered the spirit zone by accident, and suddenly the memory of the teacher's demonstration replayed inside his head. When he snapped back to reality, he unleashed an absurd burst of wind that sent everyone flying so high that when they hit the ground they broke every bone on impact. Amy was shocked and demanded to know who he was. When the Graukster reclosing into two gawked flying to who he been exposed. Shireen ran calling for his father, understanding for the first time how cruel the world really was. Now we move to the top-ranked noble family, Carmes, where Amy arrives home. She tells her father that a boy beat them. He barely reacts, saying she was only hurt because she probably skipped class again. Amy shrugs it off. She says she already learned everything they teach, and now she's bored. Her father asks when she plans to grow up, because genius or not, she's still too careless. Amy heads upstairs in a foul mood, but his warning that one day someone will stab her in the back stays with her. After a moment, she turns and asks if he knows anyone at the magic school. If he does, she wants an introduction. Winter comes and we return to our hero's home. His father asks where he is, and his mother says their son went into the woods to cut trees. That shocks him. It's still snowing hard, so his father goes into the forest to find him. As he walks, he remembers the spring day he first brought Chiron into these woods. Back then, he knew the walksting, and even then he first something strange is going on. Now our hero stands before a tree, axe in hand. It looks like he's just chopping wood, but he's really trying to repeat the magic he used that day, the power he could only bring out by accident. He can't look into the past with clairvoyance, because he knows too little about magic, but he can still enter the spirit zone. In that state, he can sense everything around him. Touch, shape, smell. One glance at a tree tells him almost everything about it. Then he notices a strange glow inside. Now he knows what it means. Still, he swings at that glowing point. He was just following the feeling. But the moment the axe landed, he understood. He could drop a tree in one strike. That had to be magic. His father, watching from behind another tree, had no idea what he had just seen. To him, it was like a bolt of lightning. Our hero thought he'd only gotten lucky, like that earlier day when he somehow landed the perfect hit. But then he understood it wasn't luck at all. It was about finding the exact point, so I kept practicing day after day. He repeated it again and again, waiting for that moment to come back. 3 years pass, and by fall, our hero is grown up. Now he knows you don't truly see with your eyes, you feel. He can cut down a tree with one clean blow. After meditating, he almost forgets to go home, even though 5 hours have passed. Everything around him makes him feel like he's become part of nature. He senses the grove, the worms moving, the roots drinking water. He can hear it all so deeply that 5 hours vanish. Then he remembers the old man's words. If he could do this, he would surely see another world. On that thought, he heads home. Outside the house, he finds the carriage and white horses, so he guesses guests have arrived. Inside, he sees his parents with the butler and chief servant of the Ocean family. The man introduces himself as Tom. Our hero can't understand why a noble servant is here. Tom starts checking him at once and asks several questions, like whether he can read and how old he is. After that, Tom says he's a very clumsy case, especially because he can read. That's unusual for a lumberjack's son, and he's also very polite, so Tom asks if he'd like to work for the family. Our hero is about to refuse, but Tom quickly explains they need someone in the library, mainly to make sure no books are taken out. The job will last 2 years. Porters handle the heavy lifting, while our hero and the butler sort the books. Our hero is drawn in right away. The library could hold the high-level knowledge a future magician needs, but this work must stay secret between him and his family. No look could need the room, and no one could even know him as removed. If that happens, he and his family will die. He finally understands his parents' faces. The pay is good, but the job puts all their lives at risk. Tom says money like this is nearly impossible to earn through normal labor, so he tells Vincent to send his son somewhere better. But Vincent says he listened because he wants his son to have a chance at his dreams. Tom laughs, asking if he really believes that. More likely, he just wants the money. Vincent pushes back. Tom can see the Moiri's well, but still doesn't believe he can truly handle the work. Then he asks Vincent why he kept lying to his son if he really wanted to help him. That brings up the father's memories. He remembers his wife teaching their son a few words as a game. By 6, the boy could already read. He even looked like an aristocrat, but what stood out most was his sharp mind. Vincent often wondered if noble blood ran through him. He kept thinking that if the boy had been born to a noble house, he might have gone far, but they were poor, and Vincent was just a lumberjack. But once the boy started following the same hard path as him, Vincent became afraid. He'd raised him to live the life of a woodcutter. Then Vincent drops to his knees before the butler and begs him to hire his son, saying the boy is smart and can read. Vincent says he isn't asking for a single coin. He just wants his son taken from this life, even though he doesn't know what will happen next. Tom fixes his head and says that since no one else will offer such a place, there isn't much to discuss. Then our hero speaks up and says he'll do it. Tom is stunned, and Chiron's father immediately ejects. Tom asks if he's serious, and our eyes again. If even one rumor spreads, he and his family will lose their heads. Our hero says that's fine. He wants this himself, and he won't blame anyone if things go wrong. Tom smiles, clearly not expecting that from a commoner. He says he'll return in 1 week, and until then the boy can still change his mind. But once he enters the estate, he won't be allowed to leave until the job is done. Vincent shouts, asking why he agreed. He thought nobles only wanted people to throw away. Blaming himself, he says he'll take responsibility and refuse for him. Instead, our hero starts crying and smiling, because to him, this is the greatest gift his father could have given. He hugs his father. The two of them cry together, though Vincent's tears come from fear, not joy. Soon, his father says he'll stay and protect their mother. That's his duty as head of the family. He tells his son to come back as soon as he can, because they still need him. At that moment, Vincent wonders if he's finally done something right as a father. A week later, a carriage arrives to take our hero away. At the same time, his father signs the contract, handing him over for the job. The moment he signs, they snatch the paper away and rush our hero into the carriage. The door shuts, and the coachman starts talking. With his sharp awareness, our hero can still sense his parents standing there, crying. He reaches out toward them, but he knows he can't waver now. This is his one chance, and they could stand him or he'd shore them. He has no idea whether he can survive 2 years among people with that much power. Then we learn about the kingdom of Tormia, where the Ogent family stands at the top, a warrior house that has produced royal swordsmen since ancient times. The former family head is a general and a third-rank state swordsman. The current head, Ogent Bishop, is 4th rank. Put simply, this family runs the city. On the way, the coachman pointed out the Ogent estate and its famous main road. Once our hero stepped out, he was asked if he was scared. People coined this family monsters. At the found path in his side, it finally started to feel real. He was standing before the Ogent family, 2nd-rank nobles. This area held the butler's workspaces, their living quarters, and the room where our hero would stay. Then the butler we already know met him and started showing him around. The first stop was the library. Our hero could barely look away. The butler explained that every book here would eventually be moved to the sacred library. Until then, our hero's job was to sort them. Each week he'd get a list, find those books, and gather them in one place. He would work from 9 to 6, but even after hours, he wasn't allowed to leave the estate without permission. After handing him a form, the butler said the head butler would explain the house rules and asked if he had any questions. After hearing everything Timbaran had arranged, our hero knew this chance was worth risking his life for. He only had one question. When could he begin? The answer was obvious. Tomorrow. By the next day, our hero was already in a butler uniform, learning that the books had to be sorted by author. The sorting status had to stay consistent too. That mattered because sorteds could overlap. A book on the history of swordsmanship, for example, could be judged in different ways. One person might file it under advanced sword arts, while another might place it somewhere more general. While building the system, our hero realized that all knowledge connects. The key link was history. It's the line that ties everything together. In that way, history becomes the backbone of knowledge. If you understand history well, learning every other field gets easier. Out of 10,000 books, about 850 were about history. To chase his dream of becoming a magician, our hero decided he had to read them all within 2 years. Then he snapped out of his thoughts and noticed the deputy head butler might be coming. Since his reading hadn't been officially allowed, he didn't want to be caught. Timoran simply remarked that our hero was hardworking and asked if he was staying late again. Taking it seriously, our hero stood at once and admitted he was. There was no praise. Timoran warned him not to let his condition get worse, because he alone prays blame. Then our hero noticed Timoran stepped closer. He wondered if the man had seen what he was reading. Instead, Timoran only brushed the dust off his clothes and reminded him that this library reflected the family, so he needed to keep himself neat. If he looked sloppy, it could stay in the Ojan family's image. He was also told to do something about his long hair. Our hero shook the whole time, but he gave nothing away. He understood the warning clearly. In this place, he had to watch himself for the next 2 years. He needed to be more careful so no one would have reasons to complain. He even thought about tying his hair back like his father. Still, a bigger problem remained. He could barely understand the book about the 3 empires and 7 kingdoms. Just learning Tormia alone was hard enough, so how was he supposed to grasp all of that? Did he need to memorize everything? Then he realized memorizing wasn't the goal. He needed to truly understand each line so he could use that knowledge any time. One day he fell asleep over his books, and when Timbaran came by, he noticed the Methra in him. He also spotted the book our hero had struggled with for half a month. With a faint smile, Timoran asked the sleeping boy if he really thought he could succeed. If our hero had actually mastered those books, Timoran would have stopped him from reading them after work. But seeing this, he relaxed. Our hero just looked like a fool with oversized dreams. Even so, life in the ocean library went on, and 3 months slipped by. Our hero kept at it, and sorting books slowly became easier, even enjoyable. He learned more about butler duties and kept managing the book records. He even started speaking with the other butlers, including the ones who failed to return books. That taught him something harsh. When books went missing, it was the butlers and servants who suffered for it. What shocked him most was that the nobles barely cared about the library at all. Even so, the place still ran, and he realized that only happened because the commoners supported it with real effort. Those same commoners risked their lives over things the nobles wouldn't even remember, so our hero decided he had to become cold and make no mistakes. It seemed safer to live as if he were invisible. Right then, a black-haired boy burst into the library yelling that he wouldn't die just because he skipped training for one day. From what he knew, our hero recognized him as the youngest son of the Ojant family. The shouting made it clear he had run away from training, which was apparently a serious problem. He rushed up until our hero to see he had Syrium. A bearded old man charged in after him, shouting for his student. He asked whether a blue-haired boy, tiny as a peanut, had run in there. That description called our hero off guard, but he acted clueless and asked who the old man was. The man answered in a rough voice that he was the sword master, the kind who could split that peanut in one strike. Then he told our hero to stop playing around and say where the boy was. Our hero immediately gave him up, saying the youngest son was hiding under the bookcase. The boy was furious. The master grabbed him by the shirt and dragged him out at once, clearly fed up with the brat skipping training. He meant to beat some sense into him. Dragging the boy away, the master showed power on par with the family head, so our hero had no choice but to stay out of it. Rumor said that once the master caught someone, they might vanish for a month. As for our hero, his reading speed kept improving. The first book had taken him 20 days, but once he learned how to truly understand them, he finished 82 history books in 4 months. Just as he spent in, the Horner's Port was only the beginning. After that, the books stopped feeling completely foreign. Once he built a solid base, the rest became much easier. After a couple hundred books, the remaining 650 no longer seemed impossible, and the more he read about magicians in history, the more sure he became. A scientist studies theories, but a magician turns theory into reality. In odd sense, magicians and scientists stand on equal ground. The reason not every scholar becomes a magician is simple: become into the spirit zone. So if our hero could connect his knowledge to that spirit realm, that would be the real beginning. That thought filled him with hope. Maybe he really could become a magician. Then the library doors opened, and the youngest son stormed in, still furious with him. He said he had endured that hell for one reason only: to kill our hero. Our hero was stunned by how stubborn he was. Still, he asked if this was really about what happened before. The blue-haired boy didn't hesitate. Of course it was. The hero know how much he had suffered. He'd climbed up and down a cliff over and over, and when his hands gave out and he thought he would die, the only thing that kept him going was his need for revenge. At that point, our hero could tell the younger son's anger was completely real, and it was honestly scary. The boy asked if he really thought this was just because of a little pain. No, he was furious because he had trusted our hero with a favor, and our hero sold him out. He said he had never seen such a coward. Pinned under that pressure, our hero thought about how people with power always shaped a rose to suit themselves. But all he said out loud was, "What can I do to make up for it?" The boy only smiled and said an apology wouldn't be enough, then told him to follow. They went to the training yard where sword practice was held. The younger son said he'd teach him himself. Our hero figured he was about to get beaten badly. Still, he decided to take it. Better that than dying after wasting the chance his parents risked everything to give him. A sword was tossed to him, and the younger son declared a duel. Now he'd make him pay for what he'd done. Our hero still didn't get why he kept calling him a coward, but the younger son was furious because our hero had let the master punish him. To him, our hero had turned his back on someone who needed help. Then his expression changed, and he said that no matter how his family treated him, he wouldn't be looked down on by anyone. Not even our hero. He told him to attack first and said he'd only start after taking 3 hits. Our hero knew he belonged to the Ojanath clan, and even one store could still break pungs. Hithaghaben, how was he supposed to survive? So he decided to use everything he had learned. He only had 3 chances. His first strike failed. The younger son blocked it. Our hero couldn't even tell how. The second strike also failed, and the younger son mocked him, asking if he even knew how to hold a sword. But our hero ignored the insult and just counted his remaining blows. 1 left. He entered the spirit zone and started reading his opponent. The younger son noticed something was off. He moved to attack, then his sword suddenly snapped. He stared in shock. Our hero realized he had pwned it off. The first strike let him feel the sword, the second helped him read the timing, and the third did exactly what he planned. The thunder strike he'd practiced for 3 years finally paid off. The younger son stared at him, unable to believe he could do that. Our hero said it wasn't some grand art, it was a thunderbolt. He explained that his father worked in the mountains, and he used to help cut trees. Since he lacked strength, he made up for it with technique. Among lumberjacks, they call it thunderbolt. The Umbertson king believes among lumberjacks just by chopping wood. After training with a sword for 15 years, he knew that kind of technique shouldn't be possible that way. Then a memory came back to him. Once, someone else had done the same thing at just 12 years old. Back then, they had seen the true talent of their family line and realized the second master was far beyond others his age. He had inherited all of his father's genius, and everyone celebrated him. But Ryan could never catch up to his brother. and that drove him crazy. Now, as he looked at our hero, he saw his brother in him. His mood turned sharp, and our hero had no idea what he'd done wrong. Then the younger son told him to shut up, pulled out an iron sword, and threw it over. He said the match wasn't over just because the wooden weapon broke. If our hero could destroy a sword like that, then he should be fought at his real level. They'd settle the winner in 1 month, with real swords. Our hero's hands shook as he held it. This time he could really die. He begged the young master to rethink it, saying he hadn't really learned anything with the Billy Willing Bud. That was exactly why he was giving it learned. If he was skilled enough to master that technique, then he could figure out the rest. One more thing. He wasn't allowed to run, because the younger son had to beat him himself. Back at his books, our hero felt miserable after learning something important about the Ajanath family. The family head had black hair, and so did the eldest son. That eldest son was a 6th-rank state swordsman. The eldest daughter had blue hair and great talent too, but she chose music and became a pianist in the kingdom. The second son, Rai, also had black hair and was called a genius. So unlike his top-ranked brothers, Rai was seen as lacking. Even with a personal mentor, everyone knew it, and that made our hero feel even worse. He had already suffered enough beatings, and now he had gone and hit the pride of someone who'd spent his whole life being compared to his brothers. He thought if this had been about books, he wouldn't be facing death. Still, there was no time to sulk. He had to think, especially if he still wanted to become a mage. He'd grown up in the mountains, so he mostly isn't drones. If he could at least learn some way to defend himself, he might survive. So he decided to do everything he could. At the same time, Rai kept training and finished his 100th lap. His coach was impressed. The time was even better than before. He asked if something had happened to make him work this hard. Rai snapped back, asking if this even counted as training. He was still standing, so he wanted something harsher. The old man could tell something was wrong. At first he guessed it was about Rai's older brother, but man, for the reason, he only said one thing. If Rai died, it wouldn't be his fault. What he brought out was a diagram Rai had studied for a long time. It explained the spirit zone used by magicians. But this other diagram belonged to swordsmen. Everyone understands their own body, yet a scheme is like the body pushed to its limit. It said masters of it can use every part of themselves perfectly, the complete opposite of a spirit zone. Should he try it? First, he decided to focus on feeling his own body. Still, he thought drilling in a scheme, the exact opposite of a spirit zone, might not work for him. He even remembered the girl he met 3 years ago. She seemed to use a scheme too, which was shocking at her age. Even so, our hero decided to practice sword moves with the spirit zone as his base. He began with cuts from 8 directions. At the same time, Wright trained in a rage because he still didn't have a scheme, and his teacher watched in alarm, worried about him. Finally, he stopped Rai's sword and said training was over for the day. Then he asked what was going on, joking that Rai looked like he wanted to die by his hang. When asked what he knew, Rai said he didn't know what he was good at, only what he was bad at. His teacher replied that this was why he wasn't a genius. Rai was clearly offended, saying he knew exactly what geniuses were and what they excelled at. A genius moves without doubt, putting all their effort into what they do best. But what people like Rai really fear is the hard work needed to face what doesn't come naturally. The burning urge to quit what they can't do. That, the teacher said, is the natural enemy of the genius. Bright smiled. Surprised by the idea, he admitted it was the best comfort anyone had given him, but he still wasn't giving up. If he couldn't get that power at first, then he'd win through effort. Swordmanship, in the end, is the art of killing with movement, and because of that, it depends just as much on reading how a living enemy will act. So our hero trained by imagining an opponent. It looked like an enemy could strike in all kinds of ways, but most attacks really came from just 8 directions. That meant he only had to master cunning and blocking from those 8 angles. So he spent the whole month doing exactly that. He practiced them day after day. As soon as he finished one form, he moved right into the next, step by step. Again and again he repeated the motions, until one moment he let go of the sword and understood something. Swordsmen choose a path of endless repetition, and in its own way, the sword is just as limitless as magic. Thinking about what was coming, our hero quietly asked for forgiveness, because he likely wouldn't make it home alive. Even so, he had no regrets. Standing between life and death, he had still discovered an amazing new world. Soon, they arrived at the dimly lit Colosseum. Rai was already there, waiting to start. He only asked our hero one thing. Was he ready? What bothered Rai most was how much our hero had changed in just 1 month. His whole presence was different. Rai had to admit that last time, our hero barely knew how to hold a sword, and now he stood there calm, gripping a real blade before a fight to the death. Ryan got even more worked up and wondered if our hero had the same talent as his genius brother, but he pushed that thought aside and attacked, sure there was no way he could lose. Watching Ryan come in, our hero knew right away the gap between them was real. Even so, he could sense something most people couldn't. He could see the path of the sword itself. Ryan was shocked that his opponent could read his blade at all, and even more shocked that he wasn't scared. Still, our hero kept telling himself that even if he couldn't rate his fair death, that fear came from a future that hadn't happened yet. If you stop thinking about the next moment, anyone can leap off a cliff. It wasn't just about being ready to die. Our hero was forcing all the fear and rage inside him under control. Ryan's eyes lit up. He wasn't afraid of death either, and he charged straight in. Our hero saw it coming and blocked a strike from the right. Ryan expected that much, but he believed some walls couldn't be beaten with tricks alone. So he pressed harder, swinging again and again with triple speed and power. Our hero realized his synesthesia let him read the sword, but not fast enough for this. Then Ryan landed a hit on our hero's chest, and blood spread across his clothes. A strange light flashed in his eyes because he knew the next strike was already coming. He flipped away to dodge it, and barely made it. Our hero couldn't figure out what he was doing wrong, while Ryan started to smell victory. Seeing our hero so lost, he asked if he finally understood how weak he was. Ogun's sword style was made for training with a great sword, so there was no way he could handle Ryan's heavy blows. Ryan had trained every gift he had, even to the point of breaking his bones, just to gain enough power to tear our hero apart. But to our hero, the fight only felt stranger. If that last slash had really been meant to finish him, Ryan should have followed through from below and cut into his side. Instead, his swings were too wide. That made our hero realize Ryan wasn't good at everything, and didn't understand the sword as deeply as he thought. Ryan relied on techniques, but lacked the insight to use them well. Was our hero saw that? He knew Ryan's real combat level was lower than it looked, so our hero rushed forward again, now knowing he had to change tactics. This time, he took the offensive. Ryan never saw that coming. He couldn't believe our hero was forcing his way toward him. Without noticing it, Ryan had backed him into a corner, yet simple attacks were suddenly hard to block. Our hero noticed Ryan's stamina was almost gone, so he kept a steady rhythm and saved his own strength. Ryan snapped. In front of him stood what felt like another copy of his genius brother, and old memories came rushing back. He remembered that twisted smirk, like he was being told not even to look up at someone so far above him. Furious, Ryan shouted that he would become the greatest swordsman in the world. Then he lunged again, and our hero couldn't tell what he was doing. Was he not thinking at all? But when he looked closer, Ryan's blade had become unreadable, too fast and too wild to follow. Now there were countless plausible attacks in front of him. The next strike came so suddenly our hero only caught it at the last instant. The impact was so hard that a sword flew from someone's hand. But it wasn't our hero's sword. It was Ryan's, and he couldn't believe it. At the very last moment, our hero changed his grip and knocked the blow away. Ryan stared in shock, with only one thought left. What exactly is this guy? Our hero was just as stunned. He could hardly believe he'd won such a brutal fight. But winning brought a new problem. This was stunned duel with an aristocrat. After hurting Ryan's pride again, anything could happen. Our hero kept his sword pointed at Ryan, while Ryan hit his own head and muttered that he'd lost again. Then he told our hero to kill him. He wouldn't complain. Our hero asked if he was serious. When Ryan tried to speak, our hero cut him off and asked if he really thought he'd survive after killing someone of Ryan's status. Ryan started to say they had both risked their lives, but our hero shouted back that Ryan chose that risk. There was Lemon trying to survive, and that whole duel had been stupid from the start. Somehow, the blame had been pushed onto our hero from the beginning, just because he didn't want to train. Ryan asked if our hero was saying he had betrayed him instead of showing respect. Our hero had a sharp answer. He said Ryan should think about the position he'd put him in. Caught between the youngest son and the fencing teacher, any honorable man would have never forced a butler into that. He drove it home by asking if Ryan had ever stopped to think how proudly he had stood against his own teacher. Only then did Ryan see how it looked from the outside, and realized he had acted like a complete jerk. Ryan answered that. Our hero collapsed from pure exhaustion, nearly dead on his feet. Ryan just stared, confused. Weren't fighters supposed to trade respectful words after a duel? Instead of the cold warrior he'd just faced, he now saw a weak boy who could barely stand. Ryan still believed he was a genius, but unlike his brother, he hadn't mocked him. He had faced him head-on with everything he had. After a pause, Ryan finally asked his name. Our hero wiped away sweat and said his name was Chiron. Ryan introduced himself too. Then Ryan held out his hand and asked if they could be friends. Back in the library, the head butler Unvo told our hero he had sorted over 7,000 out of 10,000 books. He also praised him for doing so well in his first year. A full year had passed since our hero started working in the Great Organ Library. With fewer books left to sort, his speed had gone up too. Now he only had 200 books left out of his goal of 850. and since he could read more than 3 a day, an knowledge he wanted was finally close. He had also kept training with the sword and learned more about the meaning of fear. Because of that, he felt his mental strength had grown. He truly believed he could have died that day. It was hard at first, but by refusing to quit, he kept moving toward his goal. Another big change was Ryan becoming his friend and hanging around the library. He stared at the shelves in shock, wondering if his family really owned all these books, and if they had actually read them. To our hero, this place was a treasure, but having a real friend mounted just as much. Working? He told Ryan that of course the library was full of use, since Gale and the other young master came by often. Ryan thought being smart was cool, and after getting closer to him, our hero realized that despite his huge size, Ryan was gentle and sweet. It fit him as the younger son, but when Ryan started tossing books around, our hero turned pale. If even one got damaged, he felt like he was dead. Ryan tried to calm him down. He couldn't understand how a book could matter more than a person's life, and said even if our hero burned a whole library, he'd protect him. Our hero just held his head. Ryan would be easier to like if he kept quiet, but he never changed. So our hero told him he could only feel safe if Ryan stayed still, then asked about his training. Ryan shrugged and said it was just basic practice, so he told his teacher he'd train in the library for a while. Our hero asked what Ryan was waiting for. He was supposed to be training. Instead, Ryan whined that he was just a bored kid. Our hero had already noticed how lazy Fred was getting, and once Ryan started complaining, he never stopped. Still, 10 minutes later, our hero got him to sit down and study. If Ryan came here to learn, then he had to actually learn. Clearly annoyed, Ryan asked if Sharon really needed to read this many books just to become a mage. Our hero said yes. He was still behind, since he never had the chance to study before coming to the library. Now he had read over 600 history books and knew almost everything in them. Ryan was stunned. He couldn't understand how our hero read so fast. They were the Stanhaint. Was Sharon fought Wanward Gren up. Ryan grabbed a book and said he'd read enough already. Just from the preface, it asked who would win, a magician or a warrior. The author had spent his life chasing that answer, but the book immediately wandered off into talk about the shining mountains of Artesian. Then it mentioned a man-eating tree living 6,000 meters up in those mountains. Ryan gave up right there, saying none of this was helping. Our hero snapped and asked why he stopped. He tried to make Ryan keep reading, but Ryan complained that book didn't even half sore pictures. Our hero insisted he couldn't judge it after one page and pushed him to keep going. Ryan still didn't care. To him, no sane person would even set up a fight like that. Then Ryan's older brother walked in and casually said the swordsman would obviously win. Our hero quickly bowed to greet the young master, while Ryan frowned and asked how we knew that. Our hero froze, wondering if his brother had heard everything. They all tensed up, because if a servant was caught speaking too freely with a noble's son, punishment could follow. Ryan pressed him anyway, asking why he son instead of certain. Was it just because he was a swordsman too? Ryan said certain was too strong, but anyone could see it from the way archers and mages stood on the continent. Ryan kept arguing. If they were talking about a real duel, did rank on a battlefield matter at all? Ignoring his brother's attitude, Ryan turned to our hero and asked what he thought. That caught our hero completely off guard. He barely understood what was being asked, and with so much running through his head, it was even harder to answer. Still, he knew his head it was spun clearly. He said that if a swordsman and a magician were evenly matched, beating a mage in a state of mind would be very hard. But if the swordsman could strike with full power before the spell was finished, things might change. Ryan cut in with a smug grin and said he was wrong. The swordsman would win, no question. Our hero was shocked, but Ryan already understood his brother was pushing the same idea. Ever since childhood, Ryan's brother loved stepping on whatever mattered to someone he disliked. He went on, saying our hero loved history, so we must have heard of the Winter of the Flight Gons. Our hero stayed quiet, and Ryan asked if that was the artifact that breaks a mage's state of mind. Our hero pictured it at once. A mage's natural gift is that state of mind, and fighting one in it is like trying to battle sharks in the deep sea. But if something could remove the water, the sharks would lose their edge. Anti-magic did that to mages. If the state of mind couldn't reach that armor, then magic couldn't either. How could any mage fight someone wearing such an artifact? Still, anti-magic was mostly a theory, since it was made from rack and heart mana and cost a fortune. Its unstable nature made it even harder to perfect. Even Yakra, master of the oscillation equation, only brought the armor of the 5 gods to 65% of its full power. Each piece cost as much as a kingdom's yearly budget. Ryan got annoyed. If it was that impossible to get, then how was the swordsman supposed to be stronger? His brother said the funny part was that mages created anti-magic in the first place. Ryan couldn't understand why they would make something like that. With a proud smirk, Ryan explained it was simple. There was huge demand, and selling it made mages rich. so no one needed to buy some priceless legendary armor. He looked around and asked if they understood now. In his view, mages were just pathetic people selling their own kind's weakness for money. Ryan was about to argue, but our hero lit up and said that was exactly what made magicians great. Ryan stared at him and asked what he just said. Our hero didn't back down. Anti-magic, he explained, was made by mages to limit magic in places where it wasn't allowed. It was also used well as protected in magic schools. Yes, it could be turned against magers, but that didn't lower its worth. It was still a gift of knowledge made for the good of everyone. So from that alone, he said, you couldn't claim a swordsman was stronger than a wizard. Ryan's brother was irritated, especially because his little brother was still laughing. He spun around and said ideals and reality were different. In real combat, a magician still couldn't be a swordsman. He said it only because he refused to lose. And after he left, Ryan and our hero burst out laughing. Our hero used during that whole talk, he honestly thought he might die. Ryan was thrilled. Chiron had made his brother look worse than anyone ever had. He laughed and said if our hero's tongue were a blade, he'd be the best swordsman alive. For Ryan, the whole thing felt refreshing. Maybe ideas and reality were different, like his brother said. But a curious mind keeps going, even when it has to test its own weak spots. Could that kind of intelligence really exist to bring peace to the world? 6 months passed after that. Ben had Butler sick, the world could spend its months past the expected. The library had been sorted 6 months ahead of schedule, and even books ignored for 20 years were now perfectly organized. Another butler asked if Timorin regretted letting such a good worker go. Maybe they could have found some excuse to extend his contract, but Timorin brushed that off as nonsense. Even so, he thought about our heroes sitting in the library and realized it's easy to close a book, but much harder after reading hundreds of pages. Our hero's dream had finally come true, but he barely had time to enjoy it. Ryan bridged in and asked if he was done and ready to leave. Then he saw the answer for himself. Our hero had truly finished every book. Our hero said there was nothing left to read. Ryan could hardly believe it. He thought nobody on Earth could shock him anymore. Yet our hero still did. Ryan rushed over and hugged him in excitement, even if it made our hero awkward. Still, both of them were happy, and our hero suggested they finally go play together. Ryan had hidden their friendship for a long time, and that had bothered him. Hearing our hero say how long meant how long. Our hero hadn't realized Ryan cared that much, and he felt sorry too. Most of their time together had been in the library, so he was really curious about how Ryan lived outside it. Ryan excitedly said he could show him everything now, especially since the whole family was away today. When our hero stepped outside, he was intimidated by the huge mansion and couldn't believe he was really allowed to go in through the main gate. Ryan told him not to worry. His family wouldn't be back until evening. Inside, the mansion was so quiet it felt empty, and even one room seemed as big as his whole house. He still had a hard time believing Ryan came from a family this rich. Ryan's room was at the end of the hall, and it was the smallest one there, more like a plain little training room than a noble's bedroom. The two spent their last bit of free time playing cards together. Ryan hated losing, and started to wonder if our hero was using and Sparta stated Ryan to cheat, but our hero explaining it was simpler than that. Ryan always gave himself away. Whenever he drew an ace, he pushed the card forward a little, and his face made it obvious when he had a pair. When Ryan asked how he noticed so much, our hero said, observation works best when you don't lock onto one thing. If you watch the whole person instead of one move, you can guess what comes next. Ryan's head felt ready to burst, from all that information and from losing again. He wondered if awakening his own scheme would help. Our hero encouraged him, since that was what helped him enter his own scheme of mind. Still, Ryan kept bouncing between understanding everything and understanding nothing. Then our hero spotted a novel by the window. He wanted to read it, especially after spending so long stuck with playing history books. But when he turned back, Ryan was already asleep at the table. He must have been exhausted. Our hero checked the time and wondered when the family would return. Then he heard a piano. After a moment, he remembered there was only one person in the house who could be playing. It was the court pianist, Rena Ogent, Ryan's older sister. She turned and asked what he thought of the sonata. He froze, hoping she hadn't noticed him. Once he stepped in, she asked if he was new, and he explained he'd been sorting books in the library for a year. From her reaction, she already knew him by rumor, and had heard he was smart for his age. Then she asked if he had ever played piano before. Our hero stayed cautious. A real expert was in front of him, and Ryan had called his sister the most dangerous person on the estate. Then she invited him over to sit beside her so she could teach him. He could barely believe she really met next to her at the piano. She told him it was fine. No one would dare scold him if she gave permission. Seeing how firm she was, he knew he couldn't politely refuse. And honestly, when else would he ever get a chance to sit at a piano? She started teaching him the notes and how they worked. She showed him which keys to press and in what order, and he listened closely. He enjoyed it so much that she even praised him. After a while, he asked if he could try it. She reassured him that everyone starts out badly, but the second he touched the keys, she realized his hand position was completely wrong. Even so, he played with total confidence. She almost stopped him, thinking he was doing everything incorrectly. Then she hesitated, because despite all that, the melody sounded nearly right, like he was copying her whole performance by ear. Our hero was using his zone, and with each note he adjusted and got better. She couldn't make sense of it. This wasn't no practice at own. Somehow, he grasped the whole idea almost instantly. She even started wondering why someone like him was working as a butler in the first place. Noticing the way she looked at him, our hero stopped at once. He thought he had gone too far. Right then, a voice behind him yelled for her to stop playing. The speaker was annoyed. He had only just managed to fall asleep, and she started playing the moment she got back. Our hero turned and saw his friend Chiron, who immediately asked what he was doing there. His sister looked surprised that he knew easier. Our hero wanted to deny it, or at least avoid the topic, but Rain cut in and openly called him his friend. Our hero had tried to keep that hidden, yet Rain brushed it off and said even if his sister was a wicked witch, she wouldn't care about something like that. Our hero couldn't understand how she could not care. Then she stepped in and calmly said there was nothing wrong with it. If her brother called him a friend, then that was enough for her. She added that her brother might be pitiful, but he takes responsibility for his words. She asked her hero, but he'd been thinking that while playing. Her question caught him completely off guard. Everything he thought he understood about nobles for the last 16 years was falling apart. She didn't mind her brother being friends with a peasant, and that shocked him so much that he asked Rien why he had called her a nasty witch when she seemed kind and beautiful. Rien instantly broke into a cold sweat and looked like he was staring at a monster ready to swallow someone whole. Still smiling sweetly, the older sister said her little brother was a bit hopeless, so she was glad he had a friend like our hero. Rien then nervously asked why she didn't just take him into the family since he was so cute. She stared at him, surprised he was acting close enough to offer her away like that. Rien quickly tried to backtrack and act like our hero was the one in danger, not her. Too late. She grabbed him by the neck and slammed him to the floor for speaking that way to a lady. Our hero just stood there stunned, because every idea he had about noble behavior was getting wrecked. After getting beaten down, Rien asked why she was gone so soon. She after getting Bairdat was getting certified down. She had come to pick him up, and they were leaving tomorrow. Their grandfather would arrive later to see him too. Rien sagged at the news and muttered that it really was time for that certification. Our hero didn't understand it yet, but he could see how upset his friend was. The certification was an official standard for archers and mages, recognized not just in the kingdom, but across the whole continent. Every year, around 1,000 people took the test, but only about 20 passed. There were also unofficial licenses. For example, graduating from a kingdom-approved school like the Academy of Magical Theists could make someone an uncertified 10th rank mage. After that, they could raise their rank by earning achievement points through guilds and associations. But since most people chase money and fame, the official certification still matters far more. It was amazing that Rien's brother Rai was taking the test on 18. Rien just said geniuses are different, especially when their family backs them all the way. His sister didn't tease him about it. Instead, she told him to stay strong, patted his head, and said she was going to make dinner herself since seafood had arrived from the king's palace. Before leaving, she smiled at our hero, said it was nice meeting him, and asked if they would see each other again. He was completely taken by her and started wondering the same thing. The problem was that he was leaving the mansion tomorrow. Thing he asked Rien if the sister had a boyfriend. He instantly tried to cover it up, saying it didn't matter and he was only curious, then begged his friend to forget he asked. But Rien was already grinning. He took off at once while our hero dropped to his knees, begging him to stop. Our hero chased after him down the hall, thinking Rien had looked depressed a second ago, and now he was full of energy again. Rien ran to the stairs and shouted through the whole mansion, asking if his sister had a boyfriend. Shiren immediately tried to shut him up. The servants were left confused, trying to figure out what they were yelling about. The sister, though, calmly told everyone not to mind them. She said they were just kids messing around, then told the staff to prepare the fish and head to the kitchen, but someone else had been watching the whole scene. A strange man asked whether Rien had any guests scheduled and who the young boy was. He was told no visit had been planned, which made it even stranger. The chief butler said he remembered the boy, and Timberin ordered that he be brought to the office. Later, Rien was out in the woods training. He said he only practiced for 10 minutes. That his teacher was glad to see him training again, was which acted such a loud break. The last time, Rien had lost interest almost right away. The teacher guessed that if Rien got into the palace, his attitude towards studying would change. The only real issue was his scheme. Then, while Rien was distracted, the butler rushed over and told him to return to the palace. Rien asked who wanted him. If it was his sister, she could do whatever she wanted, But the butler said his sister sent him with urgent news. His temporary butler, Shiren, was in danger. He might be killed. Rian newly choked
on his water.
He couldn't understand it. Shiren was supposed to leave today. The young butler only knew that Chief Butler Lewis had sent a report to the family head, and the mistress said it all had to do with Rain. Shiren changed clothes right away and prepared to head back to the mansion. His master stopped Rain and asked what was serious enough to make him rush off like that. Rain didn't hide anything. He said his friend Shirin, the butler, had likely been discovered by his father. He told his teacher his father might forgive it if someone spoke for him, and promised to come back and keep training later. His master refused. By then, Shiren was already in the hall, kneeling before the head of the family, who declared that he would be executed. No one they understood how things had gone this far. Still, Timorin pitied him. He should have known there was a line he could never cross. His sister tried to speak, but their father shut her down. Too many servants, and even the chief butler's report, said the boy had acted too freely around Reen. So the family had asked Shiren if he had round the contract. If he had, then he shrieked and checked. So, was there anything he wanted to say? Shiren lifted his head and asked one thing. If he was the young master's friend, what would happen to Rian? The servant stared at him in shock. Why wasn't he begging for mercy? Even the sister was stunned that, in a moment like this, he was worried about Rian. The chief butler hated that answer. He called Shiran a fool, like all commoners, and asked what could possibly happen to a noble for associating with him. But Shiran stayed calm. He said it plainly. Rian with his friend, and had been friends for a year, and that wouldn't change. The family head couldn't understand why he was so calm, and took it as disrespect toward the Ogent family. He ordered the chief butler to deal with Shiran quietly and make sure no one else learned what happened. His daughter tried to object, but he cut her off. Shiran had confessed, and the matter was settled. He made it clear that the choice was final. There was no turning back. A lot of the butlers wanted to help Shiran, but they knew they couldn't step into noble affairs. This house was their whole life, and to protect it, Inut-style conflicts had to be removed. They may have seemed cruel now, but they believed people would one day understand the choice. Then Rian burst into the hall. He shouted that he wouldn't allow this, and demanded to know who gave permission to kill his friend. The head of the family answered that he did. Rain fired back, asking what Shiran had even done. They'd only just become friends. His father said, death doesn't require a crime. Rian still didn't understand how harsh noble life was. While the family handled ugly matters like this, he got to enjoy the comfortably born noble. Rian answered that privilege meant nothing if he had to throw away his friends for it. His father called him childish. Friendship with a noble, he said, is supposed to be equal. So did Rian really believe Shiran saw him as a true equal? On what basis? Plenty of people want to use nobles for their own gain. Rian was sure Shiran would never do that, so his father gave him one condition. Prove that he and Shiran were really friends. Rian froze. If he failed here, it was over. He couldn't prove someone's heart by just blurting out words. If he were Shiran, maybe he could cut through his father's logic easily. But he wasn't. Then he remembered the look Shiran gave him when they thought, and the lesson that the best answer sometimes comes from watching first. So Rian studied the room and started piecing everything together. In front of him wasn't Tustus Funter. This was the second-class noble, head of House Ogent, of the black-haired clan, a certified fourth-class knight. That's when Rian understood this wasn't only a fight between father and son. It was a duel, and in that moment, he reached for his sword. 30 minutes earlier, Rian had begged his teacher to let him go because his friend might be killed. His master asked if he meant the boy from the library. Then the teacher said the boy was only a commoner. Rian was stunned. He never expected his master to think the same way as the others. After all, they were the ones who said the constant stories with some way could lead to real funser. His teacher then asked what mattered most to aristocrats. The answer was simple. Remove anything that harms the family's name. Did Rian really think he mattered as a friend when, in their eyes, he was worth less than a bug? His master reminded him how much pressure nobles live under and told him not to ask him to solve this problem. But Rian couldn't stand aside. He was the one who asked Shiren to be friends, and more than that, he didn't want to be a coward. His master saw how serious he was. He knew his student was honest, even naive, but feelings alone would never make him a great swordsman. That was exactly why he believed in him. So he held out his sword and told Rian to take it. He would let him go, but if Rian wasn't ready, he shouldn't take another step. Rian accepted and said he would never forget this. His teacher left him with one final thought. Abandoning a friend is like abandoning part of yourself. Now Rian knew this was a sword fight, and his own life could be on the line. He gave a short laugh. His father cornered him again. But if his father wine proof, Rian had only one answer. Believing Shiren was his friend was proof enough. The family had said this wasn't about money. Noble honor was already sinking, and he was willing to cast off even his own son to keep the family from falling further. Everyone was stunned by those words. Rian bowed and said that if protecting his friend meant leaving the family, he would accept it. His father told him to raise his sword. If Shirin truly was his friend, then he should be ready to risk his life. Rian slowly drew the blade, as should his father. He never imagined his son would stand with a sword in hand before him, but Rian said he wasn't aiming it at him. He was showing his resolve. His father still couldn't understand it. His younger son didn't even fit in with other nobles. Yet instead of staying among equals, he kept someone lower by his side, as if to feel better about himself. Rian said his father was wrong again. Shirin was the better person between them. All Rian wanted was for his friend to shine even brighter. The family had pointed at Shirin and demanded to know what he had done to make his son act like this. How had he convinced him to become friends? Shirin tried to answer that he had done nothing, but Rain cut in and told him not to say a word. He said he would protect him. Shirin told him to calm down. This was his burden to carry. When Rain first asked to be friends, Shirin had known a day like this might come, a choice between friendship and his life. Even if he died here, he said, he would never going to be friends with someone like Rian. The words hit so hard that even Rian started crying. He answered that this was exactly what he wanted to say. Banishment or not, they would still be friends. Everyone watching was reminded that, no matter their title, they were still people with real feelings. A true friend is someone who never turns away, and everyone either has a friend like that or wishes they did. Then the family's grandfather arrived. He barked at them for putting on such a scene, then laughed at how wild young people could be. His sister relaxed at once. Sure things would be okay now. The family head had expected him later, but the old man had come early after his companion ran off with a young maid. Shirin could hardly believe it. This was General Tormia himself, a third-degree swordsman, and Rian's grandfather. He took his seat and remarked that the hall was just as noisy as ever, adding that youth really is the best time of life. The family head looked completely thrown off now. He insisted nothing was wrong. This issue had already dragged the family's image through the mud. That Grampley the Renish said nothing rudge. He had watched everything from behind the scenes, and since so many people clearly had something to say, they should hear them out. The first to speak was the eldest daughter, Rena. She said that even though she had only met Shirin yesterday, she could tell he was bright and talented. On top of that, he had followed every rule of the contract and was supposed to leave today anyway. With all that in mind, it was hard to claim Shirin had evil intentions toward Rian. So in her view, his actions were not some stain on the family's honor and name. After hearing his grandfather turned to his other grandson, Rai. Rai started by saying he didn't like the boy, and that made his father happy for a second. Then he added that it didn't matter. His father was stunned and asked what he meant. Rai made it clear. Even if he disliked him, he had no right to choose his brother's friends. He just wanted this whole mess over with so he could finally leave for the royal palace. Grandfather heard him out, joked that this house was more fun than his own, and moved on. Next, he called on one person who knew our hero better than most. Timbaran, the deputy butler. He understood servants usually aren't allowed to share opinions, since they only carry out their master's orders. Still, Timbaran said Shirin had done every task perfectly, and even finished 6 months early. The chief butler got angry, but grandfather cut in and asked if he knew about the boy's friendship. Timbaran said he only knew Shirin spent a lot of time with the young master. He didn't know they were friends, but he added that if Shirin were just some ordinary child, he never could have sorted 10,000 books. By then, everyone could feel the tension easing. The only one still pushing for punishment was Shirin's father. That's when grandfather said he couldn't allow it. His grandfather looked confused, but the father was suddenly pleased. Grandfather explained that yes, Shirin and Ryan were true friends, but this still had no end. If it kept going, rumors would spread, and their enemies could use that as a weakness. Everyone in the family held an important place in the kingdom. Even Rai had a certification test ahead of him. Grandfather said a family this big carried heavy burdens. He called Chiron a smart boy and said he should understand. Then he looked straight at his grandson. He could tell Ryan was serious. Still, grandfather said he didn't yet understand how much weight came with countless lives depending on a family like this. Then he asked Chiron what he sawed. He knew Archimel had taught Ryan what real fencing was, but could he end it here? Chiron answered that he couldn't. That shocked everyone. Chiron went on, if he truly became a burden to Ryan, then he would never see him again. But that still wouldn't stop him from calling Ryan his friend. They were friends, and with that in mind, he would obey whatever they decided. Ryan was hurting. Even if Chiron survived, losing him would still break him. Deep down, he knew leaving his friend would be like losing part of himself, so he refused to accept it. He drew his sword, and his sister yelled for him to stop. Too late. He drove the blade into the floor and declared that he, Ryan Ogent, third son of the Ogent family, would become Chiron's sword from this day on. His father shouted that his son was a complete idiot. The oath of knighthood dated all the way back to the founding of the Kingdom of Tormia. during an age when nations fought endlessly over land. Atholphus I, the strongest among them, united those lands and built Tormia. But the new kingdom still had to deal with powerful neighboring states, so defeated kings were allowed to keep ruling their territories, and from that came the famous Knight's Oath. In exchange for swearing to serve only one lord as that lord's sword, they were granted noble status. That was how the nobility began. So taking this oath was no small thing. Everyone was stunned. Ryan, though, looked satisfied. Now no one could make him take it back. Our hero rushed over and asked what he had just done. Grandfather sakes serious. If Ryan truly meant he would be Chiron's sword, then what exactly was it about our hero that inspired that kind of loyalty? What made Chiron shine so brightly in Ryan's eyes? Brian smiled and answered that a sword doesn't judge, it protects. Grandfather burst out laughing and said that maybe fools need to go that far if they want to grow. Then he smirked and added that Ryan talks big, but his sword skills are awful, so he almost felt bad for Chiron getting stuck with him. At last, Grandfather still didn't stuck enough. We must down was tum. Even if Ryan wasn't the finest sword, Grandfather said, he would never turn that blade on Chiron. He asked our hero to look after his grandson, and Chiron thanked him for accepting this. Grandfather added that now that the two were bound like this, he couldn't just let it pass. He ordered the chief butler to bring Chiron's parents to the mansion. Our hero said that really wasn't necessary. Ryan told him he hadn't done it just because they were friends. Unlike his brother, he said, he knew how to recognize someone who draws people in. That was why he was willing to bet his life on a person like our hero. Chiron turned red. Those huge words again. Feeling the pressure, he muttered that Ryan would need to train a lot harder if he planned to protect him. While they were talking, Ryan's sister came in and asked if it was true her brother had lost a duel. Then she noticed him on the floor. Ryan barked at her to leave too, but our hero said she had helped them a lot this time. Ryan asked what their father and grandfather were doing now. She said things were complicated because of the Knight's Oath, and the adults were trying to figure out what to do next. Still, their father wanted to send both of them to the Kaizen Swordsmanship Academy, since Ryan had already said our hero had talent with a sword. Shiren was shocked, but she said he was practically family now, and she'd already told them about his ability. It seemed the whole family wanted Shiren to outdo Ryan. Ryan yelled that he was being sent to school right when he could spend all day playing with Shiren. Well, this was eating so right. He blurted out that Shiren would become a mage because he had awakened the spirit state. She froze, then started thinking hard. Had her brother really sworn himself to a future mage? Wouldn't that make a swordsman look weaker than a wizard? Ryan's only answer was to tell her to get out. Then it clicked for her. During their last fight, our hero had used the spirit zone. That was why he won. He could read and predict every attack. She praised that trick highly, saying even she never would have expected it. Our hero wanted how that was practicable, and she told him he was amazing. She'd learned at school that the stronger your focus, the stronger your spirit zone, and reaching that level while holding a sword was incredible. Shiren just stood there confused. Both Ojins could tell that if our hero stayed this awkward, they'd never hear a growth word. So his sister broke the silence and said she'd talk to grandfather. After all, Shiren's future now depended a lot on whether Ryan would attend sword school. Ryan jumped up and asked what would happen to his old teacher. His sister replied that Master Keat will run a new Everton. Because of that, he had decided to end Ryan's training contract tomorrow and give his farewell speech in the morning. Ryan couldn't believe it. For all he knew, the teacher might already be gone. Just then, the butler entered and announced that the family had arrived and were waiting in the hall. The head of the house added that our hero could go see them now if he wanted. Shiren lit up and rushed off at once. He moved so fast the butlers on the stairs begged him to slow down. He barely heard them, and even asked them not to speak to him like some nobles since he was still just a peasant. They replied that they weren't allowed to do that and could be punished for it. Shiren only smiled and said he wouldn't tell anyone. He opened the waiting room door, saw his family, and ran straight into their arms. Looking at them closely, he noticed how thin they seemed. They must have spent the whole night worried he wouldn't come home alive. His mother, crying, insisted that she and his father had been fine, had plenty to eat. Then his father asked why he hadn't come home sooner, if his work was already finished. Was the family keeping him there on purpose? Shiren quickly said it wasn't like that at all. They had simply offered him a great chance. When his parents didn't understand, he told them everything that had happened. They were stunned. Just from working in the library, their son had found a friend who gave him a knight's oath, but his father still needed to hear it clearly. Was this really true or some kind of terrible joke? Was someone mocking him? Shiren firmly said no. Every word was true. His father immediately grabbed him in a crushing hug, saying he knew no one stayed the same after entering a noble house. At that moment, the head of the Ocean family, Biscoff, arrived. Ryan and Rihanna stood behind him. Shiren's parents could hardly believe their eyes. They quickly stood and bowed, asking why someone so important was treating them this way. Biscoff asked if Shiren had already explained everything. That was when his parents finally understood. Everything their son said was true. Even sitting this morning tables full of rich food that were still danced. Sharon's father didn't even know what a knight's oath really meant. Still, he couldn't believe nobles would show this much kindness to commoners, so he asked again over tea. He wanted to know if it was really true that the young lord had bowed to his son, because the whole thing felt unreal. Biscoff confirmed it. He said the Ogent family follows a strict warrior code, and a knight's oath cannot be ignored. If they looked down on Sharon's family just because of class, Ryan's honor would disdain too. That's why everyone in the house would keep treating them with respect. He asked them not to feel uneasy and promised they would not turn their backs on Sharon. From the side, the grandfather muttered that he never thought he'd hear words like this from his own son. That only made Sharon respect the Ogent family more. Taking in a peasant was already a lot, but Biscoff chose honor over pride and never tried to scare anyone. Then Biscoff cut to the real point. Sharon can already use the state of the soul. He explained that this power doesn't come from effort alone. You had to be born with that gift. That since Sharon wants to become a maid, Biscoff said he would help him get an unofficial magic license as soon as possible. He even thought Alpheus Magic Academy, one of the kingdom's top 5 schools, would suit him. He hadn't expected Chiron to go that far, but with his new standing, refusing would be foolish. To meet the Ogent's standards, he should attend. The grandfather, clearly tense, asked what that would mean for a lumberjack's son. The answer was simple. If he finished there, he could become a wizard. Chiron's father was sinned, but Chiron could only finish above the academy. There was still one huge problem. Magic schools were for the elite. Commoners simply didn't get in. So Ryan's grandfather gave the only answer they had. Adopt Chiron. His father froze, and they explained this was the only solution the family had found after discussing it together. They handed Chiron's parents a document and said a young cousin in their family had no children. If Chiron's name was added there, the issue would disappear. They also made it clear they were not cheering to take him away. It would only exist on paper. But legally, that was the only way for Chiron to become a noble. His father could hardly process it. A boy from their family becoming a noble sounded impossible, yet accepting it also felt like losing their son. He looked at Chiron, silently asking what he should do. But Chiron had already made up his mind. He took his father's hand and said he could not become another man's adopted son. Hope filled his father's eyes, but Ryan's older sister tried to call him. She said, "Dolda be capable, nothing more," and Chiron could still reach his dream. Even the grandfather warned that almost no one in the world gets a chance like this. But Chiron didn't budge. He said if becoming a mage meant changing fathers, then he would rather stay a peasant. The grandfather snapped that commoners aren't accepted into magic academies, but Sharon answered that if that was the price, then he simply wouldn't go. The old man rose and shouted Chiron's name, asking why he was being so stubborn when success always demands sacrifice. If he couldn't give this up, then when's his dream really important? Chiron answered that if that was true, then the dream itself didn't matter. It came from his parents. They were the roots that taught him to read, and his dream was just the fruit that grew from what they gave him. Everything he had began with them. One chance in front of him could never outweigh all the chances his family had already given him. Giving them up would be like drying out and dying. He was thankful for the offer, but the only parents he had were the two standing beside him. The whole room felt silent. The grandfather couldn't tell if this came from morals, belt, or something else. Then Chiron's father suddenly said they should go ahead and adopt him. The grandfather objected at once, saying Chiron's own feelings had to come first. But then Chiron's father said something nobody expected. Chiron was not his real son by blood. His mother was shaken that he said it out loud, and Chiron was confused too. Vincent went on. He said he and his wife had never been able to have a child, and then one day, Chiron came into their lives. He always believed the boy must have been born to nobles. A child that fine didn't alive to a man like him. But joining another family wouldn't erase where he came from. This golf questioned it for a moment, but thinking back, everyone knew Chiron never really looked like the son of woodcutters. Still, hearing it out loud sounded almost like a rejection. Chiron asked how his father could say something like that without talking to him or the rest of the family first. Vincent replied that now his son was grown, he deserved to know. But Chiron asked if his father really thought he hadn't known. He said he never asked because that was how one person could still have 2 true parents. But now his father was asking him to have 6. Vincent broke down, sweating and crying, because it only wanted Chiron to keep chasing his dream. Chiron said he wasn't giving up on it. He just wanted his father to think about how it would feel to be abandoned by his parents twice. Vincent pulled him into a hug and begged forgiveness, swearing he would never let that happen. He promised he would never leave his son and asked Chiron to forgive such a foolish father. Everyone there understood that parents often hurt their children while trying to help them. Raising a child without support hurts parents too. After watching all this, Biscoff finally spoke. We thought Althea's Magic Academy had a few special arrangements, and maybe its headmaster would agree to one. The grandfather couldn't imagine a man like that agreeing to anything, so he asked why Althea's would ever owe him a favor. Biscoff just smiled and said that for a man who could twist even his own ears, his son was proof enough. 3 days later, while Ryan was preparing to leave for fencing school, the Ogan family let Chiron's family stay in their home for a while. Even after apologizing to Chiron, his father kept wondering how long he could keep his courage up this time. There was one good thing though. Chiron and Ryan now had plenty of time together, but after those 3 days, Ryan still had to leave. He complained through tears about being shoved into a carriage and sent off to fencing school, wondering why he couldn't just wait and enroll later like Chiron might. Chiron reminded him they still didn't know if he would get in. He promised to write every day and said they could meet during breaks. Ryan placed a hand on his friend's shoulder and said Chiron had to become a mage because he would become the strongest knight, the sword that would protect him. He was getting carried away when his sister smacked him. She told Ryan to focus on his studies because she worried about him, then told Chiron to spend time with his family since their grandfather would handle the rest. Chiron thanked her with a bow, and she thought to herself what a strange and special child he was. At first she had seen him like a little brother, but he was far more thoughtful than that. Even in a painful moment like this, he wouldn't betray what he believed, so she taught him to keep trying, and even to be too amazed, and help watchful than his brother too. Then Sharon got into the carriage with his family. On the way, he was told that if he entered the Magic Academy, he would have to hide the truth from everyone. He passed that same morning on to his friend. The meeting between Rihanna Ogent and Chiron Ariane, two fierce young hearts, would later be remembered as the start of an event that shook their whole world. Then the story shifts to Althea's Magic Academy. Grandfather Ogenta sat with his tea and asked what was wrong, since the man across from him had been thinking in silence for half an hour. It was the old man we met long ago. He said that even after 50 years of friendship, he still couldn't accept this request. He'd already suffered enough because of Ogenta in their younger days, and he wasn't about to bend the rules now. Special agreements weren't made to rescue noble plans. Many apply every year, and even those exceptions have strict conditions. Ogent thought his old friend was being stubborn on purpose, making him wait even though he clearly already had an answer. So he finally said our hero wasn't an ordinary kid at all, and ain't caught the headmaster's interest. With his arms crossed, the headmaster said he hadn't asked to meet just some unusual boy. He wanted to hear about his youngest grandson's friend, a boy who must be truly special. Seeing our hero made him think of himself when he was young. Still, he asked what the issue was. If the boy was that gifted, why wasn't he applying on his own? There had to be a problem. Ogent went quiet, then admitted there was one, and it was a big one. The boy wasn't a noble. That instantly changed the headmaster's face. He stared at Ogent and asked if this was the blind boy with blue eyes. From Ogent's point of view, all his thoughts about our hero came rushing back. He had first seen him as a clever kid who knew how to sway adults, but when Ogent offered to raise his status, the boy refused. Ogent even left, asking what kind of person would turn down the chance to become a noble. But the headmaster understood right away. Our hero was someone who truly grasped cause and effect. Ogent knew most people never understood that, and that was why they lost their way. New chances can come, but once someone throws away their beliefs, they can lose everything. Our hero would never abandon what he believed was right, and that reminded them of their younger days. The headmaster thought people like that are dangerous in a way. Some will praise their convictions, while others will hate them for the same reason. He fell silent for a moment, remembering the past. Then Oga asked if that meant he still hadn't forgiven himself. He tried to comfort him too. After guiding so many talented students, wasn't it time to let that guilt go? But the headmaster said Ogant was right, even if he was arrogant. He taught children so they would never become like him. So if our hero really resembled him, there was no promise he wouldn't end up on the same terrible road. Ogant answered that his friend Alpheus had been a once-in-a-century genius. People called him the light of the Milt family, but one wrong step nearly ruined his life. He managed to come back from it, though Ogent still couldn't believe that man had ended up as an old headmaster right here. The headmaster shot back that he never expected Ogent to start helping the heavens either and make himself look like an official third-rate fool. He even joked that he was worried for the future of the kingdom of Tormia. The headmaster laughed, and Ogent asked if this might really be fate, since even he knew the boy. After all, the child who advanced 4 years ago had come back. The headmaster said he didn't believe in fate, but it was true that the boy's talent had been blocked by his birth and pushed onto a different path for 4 years. And now that same boy was standing right in front of him. If that wasn't fate, what was? At last, the headmaster turned to Ogent and said he would accept Shuren. Then spring came, 3 months later. Now 17, our hero was getting into the carriage and saying goodbye to his family. He asked how he looked, and everyone seemed happy with him. Then his father coughed and asked if he hadn't forgotten something. Shirin, now 17, joked that he wasn't going to kiss him, but his father was serious. When Shirin still wouldn't do it, his father kissed him on his forehead and told him he'd do crits. He said it because he believed in him. Shirin then asked if everything at home would really be okay, since the family head had offered to find them a house in the city. But his father was proud to be a hunter and said he'd manage in the mountains. He'd already accepted that even if he refused Ogent family support, they'd force help on them anyway. Shirin had thought getting into the magic academy would be huge news for the whole village, but his father told no one. Shirin understood why. His father didn't want to feel like a burden. And with that, his first day at the Academy of Magic began. Getting out of the fancy carriage felt a little awkward for him, but Timbaran told him they had arrived, so it was time to step out. Shirin got down and saw the Orpheus Academy of Magic before him. Timbaran told him his own job was to cover the tuition and school supplies. Shirin's only job was to study hard. Shirin thanked him, but the butler tried to brush it off. Even so, Shirin bowed and said he had to thank him from the bottom of his heart. He said he would never forget this kindness, because Timbaran had judged him worthy. Timbaran replied that a peasant stays a peasant and can't rise above a noble, but not everyone even gets a chance like this. He knew that once Shirin entered the school, many nobles would look down on him. Even so, he told Shirin to stay as stubborn as he'd always been. Smiling, Timbaran added that if he could endure that much, he'd make it to the end. Then he told Shirin to follow him. They still had to finish his registration. Orpheus Academy of Magic was known as the Cradle of Geniuses, and now our hero was about to find out who he would meet there. As to help him register, Timorin said goodbye and told Shirin to contact him if he ever needed anything. Shirin also learned that the academy used a 10-rank class system. There were 420 students in all, with 30 in the top graduating class. Only 10 students graduated each year. Then the headmaster of Orpheus called for him and asked if he was the new student. He asked whether Shirin remembered him. Shirin said he did, and that he'd never forgotten their meeting or this huge chance he'd been given. The headmaster said he could talk leader, but first Shirin had to teach again for his chance. Shirin didn't know what kind of test he meant, but the headmaster said it wasn't hard. It would only decide which class he should enter. Then he asked if Shirin could enter the spirit zone. Shirin answered at once that he could. The headmaster looked uneasy, since the boy had opened it on his own. He couldn't help thinking how different Shirin's life might have been if he'd had this chance from childhood. Still, it was late, and Orpheus would have to teach him the basics. Since the entrance hall would soon be full of children, bringing him in too early could hurt Shirin's reputation. So the headmaster came up with another idea and asked if he wanted a quick tour first. As they walked the halls, Shirin noticed strange things, but the headmaster drew his attention to the classrooms. He explained that beginners study to the lower ranks, from 10th class up to 8th. Shirin couldn't stop staring at all the students using magic. But the headmaster said the next place was a little different. They moved on to the higher classes, ranks 7 through 4. The move there felt completely different. The students, around his age, were deep and excited, talked about energy and the student of their points. Shirin had no idea what they were talking about, and it scared him. It was like everyone spoke the same language except him. At one point, someone made a mistake during practice. Instead of getting upset, the headmaster smiled, pointed out where she'd gone wrong, and gave advice right away. Shirin couldn't believe it. No one was being scolded. Instead, the headmaster simply told them to try again. It all felt like a completely different world to him. Then he suddenly noticed a familiar face he hadn't expected to see there. As he kept walking through the school, he spotted a notice board. It showed the rankings for the middle classes, and the first name that caught his eye was a noble girl in first place. Shirin was excited. Everyone listed there had trained abilities like his, but one name stood above the rest, Carmes. That made him want to compete even more, because here he'd be starting over from scratch. At that moment, he had only one goal, to take first place himself. Then he wondered if that top-ranked Carmes was the same girl. One look was enough for him to realize it was. The same girl who had once tried to put him in his place. He turned away, hoping she hadn't noticed him. He really wished that were true. Amy passed right by him, and her friend instantly got interested, thinking our hero was ridiculously handsome. Carmes, though, felt like she'd seen him somewhere before. Her friend quickly teased her, asking if she was finally interested in a guy, since she normally didn't care about them at all. Carmes denied it and said he just looked familiar, but her friend kept pushing and wanted her to admit she liked him. Carmes was known as the most popular girl in the middle ranks. Students older than her, younger than her, and her own classmates all chased after her, and she turned them all down. She was the model student everyone looked up to, and the only one here who knew her past was our hero, and that had him sweating. Then they reached the third test area. A lot of kids were already seated, so they had clearly finished. The director told our hero to watch the student being tested ahead of him. That child student set a circle and was told to open his spirit zone and sense the letters on the floor. The judges asked him to describe what he felt so they could measure the strength and movement of his spirit zone. The director quietly told our hero to just answer honestly. Then they asked if he could use magic. He said he could make things float, and apparently the more you can do, the higher you score. Next, they asked for the farthest number he could sense. He answered 6, which shocked the teachers. The principal explained that this number showed the diameter of the child's spirit zone. After that, they asked what color he felt most strongly, and he said red. That made him a divergent type, meaning his spirit zone was unusually strong for his age. They kept going, asking about distance, shape, and temperature. His answers amazed the teachers, and it seemed this year's students were impressive overall. Then it was our hero's turn. The principal encouraged him not to panic and to do his best. The teachers watched him closely since he was the boy admitted through special selection. Still, many of them thought he was an odd choice because 17 was late to start. He had also come in under the Ocean family name, which made him seem even more suspicious. Most of them believed his talent had been found too late and that he'd be crushed at the school. When they asked if he could use magic, our hero admitted he couldn't. He had never learned. That immediately put one teacher on edge. Even without training, shouldn't he know at least the basics? The headmaster understood the reaction. Magic comes from knowledge shaped in the mind, and noble children grow up learning enough to use it naturally. Our hero never had that chance. Then they told him to step into the same circle and activate his zone. A moment he did. He noticed all kinds of things that had been hidden before. They asked him for the farthest number, but he stayed quiet. Everyone assumed he was embarrassed, and even the director reminded him to be honest. They weren't comparing him to anyone, just trying to place him correctly. Our hero finally stayed convinced the number, but it was so far away he couldn't read it clearly. They told him he had to say it so they could measure him, but he explained that wasn't the problem. He could feel the number, yet it kept getting bigger every second. A teacher said that could happen and told him to start with the first digits he could make out. So our hero said the row started with 314. The teacher quickly replied that no such number should appear and asked if he was sure. He was. Then the teacher realized it might be possible. In rare cases, the number starts showing pi, which happens when the zone is too large with a test skill. That meant our hero's spirit zone might be over 30 meters. Next, they asked which color he felt the strongest. Shiran answered, blue. That shocked everyone even more. Now the director finally understood why his friend had pushed so hard to get our hero admitted. At the same time, he wondered in horror if there was even a class level for talent like this. One teacher then asked how many spheres were floating around him. Our hero started to count with his eyes, then realized he could simply feel them, so he answered, 860 spheres. The principal turned pale. He understood just how dangerous this might be. Another teacher asked how cold he felt. Our hero answered right away that he was freezing. His values were far beyond normal, so they asked him to step outside calmly. The teachers needed to meet and decide where to place him, along with the others who passed. But the second he left, the room exploded into discussion. None of them could process how a 17-year-old could have a spirit zone wider than 30 meters. Its size was already beyond the test's limits, and this concentration was 86.7, without any boosting skill. One teacher even compared him to a monk who had trained alone in the forest for years. Still, another teacher who disliked him argued it had to be fake. A boy who knew no magic giving those answers sounded impossible. Maybe he had just thrown out random numbers, but the purple-haired teacher shut that down. There was no reason for a student to lie in a placement test, and the teachers themselves had forgotten that pi appears as an error code, so the creator hero wasn't ordinary, and he clearly wasn't doing that for attention. Just then, the principal came over and asked where they should send him. One teacher said 6th grade is still theory, while magic starts in 5th. Since his spirit zone was already so developed, she recommended 5th grade. This was Sina Oliver, a certified 6th rank mage. Another mage, Ted, objected at once. He argued that our hero was still a 17-year-old who knew no magic, so placing him there would be too much for him. Oliver answered that struggling wasn't unusual. Other students did too. Ted got angry, convinced she only wanted him in 5th grade because she taught that class. The two kept arguing, so the other teachers decided to discuss it without them. They all knew our hero had talent, but he was still new, so some thought he should start all the way from 10th grade. The problem was that putting him with little kids would kill his motivation. Then an older woman suggested 7th grade. It was a higher level class that taught spirit zone basics, and if he really was that gifted, it could muffle plast. The principal agreed right away, and decided our hero would join the 7th grade. That brings us back to how the Academy's 10-class system works. Students are split into 10 levels. The lower group covers grades 10 through 8, where they mainly train their spirit zones. The middle group is grades 7 through 4, where they learn how to use both magic and the zone. and the top group, grades 3 through 1, goes through harsh training to become professional mages. By then, our hero had already reached his new clumps. The teacher introduced him, and the students looked at him strangely. He was older than they expected, yet he had been placed straight into the middle ranks. Even so, our hero was happy. He had finally entered the magic academy he had dreamed about his whole life. The academy itself covers 75.42 kilometers of mountain land. It also has more than 33 buildings and 40 training centers, plus the dorms. Students can only leave during vacations, but the school has everything they need. Classes end at 5 p.m., and after that they can study all night or form research schools with other students. That drive to keep learning is what made this school so prestigious, and our hero felt it was exactly what he had hoped for. The lessons were tough and demanded a huge amount of knowledge. Even nobles who had studied since childhood struggled, but our hero was ready to give it everything he had. Basics of knowledge. Thanks to its history taught in order, he slowly memorized the world's accumulated knowledge. Class ended, but our hero was nervous. After lunch, he had practical spirit state training and a schedule to stay where. So he asked her girl if she knew where the training ground was. She looked shy, clearly surprised that Cheyenne was speaking to her, but she still answered. She said today's practice would be at the second joint training ground. When our hero asked what joint meant, she explained that all middle classes trained together twice a week. She added that today was one of those combined lessons. Our hero couldn't imagine how all the middle classes could train at once, but when he got there, the place was already packed and full of energy. That was because the same red-haired girl everyone called the middle school star was there. Students kept asking Amy the same with them, but she ignored them all. Our hero saw her pass and remembered how popular she was. He definitely didn't want to run into her, but with these joint classes happening twice a week, that would be hard. Now he could only wonder if he could fit in and stay unnoticed. Just then, a teacher arrived. Atala Rami, a 6th rank mage. She asked who was here for this kind of class for the first time, then said this would be a regular lesson from now on. She also pointed out this year's new student, our hero. Then everyone turned it out. She asked him to stand and introduce himself. He got up, greeted the class, and tried to say a few more words. Then he froze. He had no idea how to continue. Amy and her friend whispered that he was the guy they had seen yesterday. Amy felt she knew him from somewhere, but couldn't place it. Another student joined in, asking if they knew the new boy. They didn't, but the rumors were already spreading. His entrance exam scores were said to be unbelievable, and even the teacher seemed focused on him. Everyone started wondering the kind of family he came from. Then Amy suddenly remembered who he was, and her mood instantly dropped. The Carmes family was known as a line of geniuses. Their special trait, the red eyes, only appears in direct heirs and lets them remember certain events with perfect clarity, so ordinary studying means almost nothing to them. Amy, the youngest daughter of Carmes, was called the most gifted child in the family. She may have inherited that genius completely. Since she was little, everything came easy, and winning had become blurring. That was exactly why she got so free. Her family hardly had to help her with anything, and she grew up thinking she could do whatever she wanted. Then one day, her whole world changed when she ran into a peasant boy in an alley. Her friends noticed something was off, but Amy quickly brushed it off, saying her shoes just hurt. She looked back at our hero and still couldn't believe it. Her red eyes never got memories wrong. She had always assumed he was a noble, but now he seemed to be a commoner. How did he get into the academy? Worse, that old encounter was a symptom she never wanted to bring it back. Amy had worked hard to erase every trace of that past, so one thought hit her hard. Did he remember her too? Bit by bit, the memories came rushing back, along with pieces of what might happen if he started talking about the past. More than anything, she feared everyone finding out how interested she had been in him, so much that she had even wanted to undress him. Amy quickly realized she had to stop this somehow. Meanwhile, our hero felt a chill, like he could sense her staring at him. Atelo Moodval of the lesson, explaining that a zone reflects a magician's mental state. Its basic form is a sphere because that's the easiest shape to hold in your mind. Still, that shape isn't always useful in real combat, so she decided to show them a visible zone. Our hero could now actually see the teacher's zone. She repeated that the sphere was only the starting form. To make it clear, she chose to demonstrate it herself. First, she made a target beside her, then cast magic at one farther away. She explained that her zone had a 10-meter range, while the target stood 20 meters away, so she'd use a fireball to show the limit. Our hero watched closely. This was the first time he could really see how magic was being used. A taller formed a small fireball and launched it at the target, but it fell short. She explained that most magic can't keep its form once it leaves the zone. Then she showed that by stretching the zone in one direction, the spell could reach farther. Like the other students, our hero was stunned. He hadn't even known a zone's shape could be changed like that. But Atala warned them there was a drawback. Reshaping a zone takes huge focus, and in a real fight, every second matters. Changing it non-stop is too inefficient, so most mages rely on 4 standard forms: defense, attack, target, and evasion. She began with the defensive form, a cube made to keep the zone from collapsing under attack. The more faces it has, she said, the stronger its protection. Next came the star-shaped attack form, which helps track a target's movement and works especially well against many enemies. Then she covered the target form, built for long-range combat, though it's weaker against fast-moving opponents. With that form, the main thing is rotation speed. The students wondered how she could switch forms so fast. Our hero, meanwhile, was already thinking about how a 10-meter zone could be used in a real fight. Atala added that even 5th-year students struggled with this, so she would keep explaining through examples. Some students behind our hero were already dreaming that if they mastered it quickly, they could move into advanced classes. Then the teacher used the next form, and everyone was shocked. Part of the zone extended away from her body. The students couldn't understand it. If a zone came from the magician's mind, how could it exist away from the body? Our hero started wondering where the true center of a zone really was. Atala explained that the evasion form is extremely hard to use and usually handled only by specially trained mages. Its key feature is that if the mage isn't at the center, the zone can move much more freely. That means it doesn't need instant casting, and its reach can become incredibly wide. The class was amazed by her skill, and our hero realized there was far more behind her calm look than he first thought. Then Atala asked if they'd like a student demonstration, instead of ending the first lesson there, and called up Amy, the academies' top student. The class cheered, but Amy's friends noticed she didn't look happy at all. Right now, being the center of attention was the last thing she wanted. Still, Amy was chosen to demonstrate the target form, one of the 4 zone types. Its strength is long-range combat. As Atala had said, it's weaker against moving targets or large groups. But if someone can rotate and control the zone at high speed, most of those weaknesses fade. At long distance, that form can become a nightmare for the enemy. Everyone watched Amy perform, stunned by how smoothly she handled it. Most trainees try to master all 4 forms, but Amy kept taking first place using only the target form. Our hero could only think of one thing. Amy's control was overwhelming. She didn't just rotate the zone while standing still, she swept through everything ahead of her. She destroyed the targets in a single run, moving with total confidence and almost effortless grace. Our hero had heard plenty of boys wanted to date her, and that she ignored nearly all of them. Wanted this, he finally understood why they were obsessed with her. She wasn't just a pretty noble girl, she was exceptional at everything. Still, he couldn't help wondering why she spent time with those thugs. Amy finished the test in just 20 seconds and reached level 9. When it was over, she glanced straight at our hero. He had no idea what that look meant. The rest of the class went wild. Amy had never looked at anyone like that before. Everyone quickly realized she was staring at the new student. Amy hadn't meant to do it. It happened on instinct, and now she was panicking. Our hero broke into a cold sweat, while everyone around them started wondering if the two knew each other. Both of them were sure the other remembered. After sitting down, Amy thought about how badly things would go if he started spreading stories about her. For a moment, she even wondered if she needed to silence him, but after calming down, she reminded herself that she was the academy's top student. Even if he said something, most people probably wouldn't believe him. One wrong move would only create more trouble, so she had to stay careful. Her friend asked why she had blushed during the demonstration, but Amy kept quiet and claimed nothing happened. Once the demonstration ended, the classes split up for practice. Atalar stayed with the 7th years and told them to begin with the defensive form. Even making one properly would be a good start, and on a battlefield, focus is what keeps a mage alive. Our hero stood still and focused on the feeling of compressing his zone. He tried to sense it tightening into shape, then lifting its edges into zone structure that wouldn't break. He learned if he had done it, but without seeing it, he couldn't be sure. He thought this would be much easier if he could use the same visible zone the teacher had shown earlier. He went to the teacher and asked to use the visible zone. She hesitated since the older students were supposed to go first, but no one else was using it, so she let him try. Hearing that Chiron was about to use the visible zone made Amy tense up. She nearly choked on her water and blurted out, "How could a 7th grader even do that?" Still, Amy's friend seemed more worried about Amy than about Chiron. A crowd quickly gathered to watch as Chiron activated his zone. Everyone froze when they saw how huge it was. Only then did Chiron start thinking about the size himself. How big was his diameter going to be? People couldn't believe it. A zone that wide made no sense. Wasn't 13 the usual max? Chiron knew his zone was far bigger than normal, so he forced it to shrink as much as he could, like squeezing down a soap bubble. On his first day of training, the last thing he wanted was his more attention. He tried to make a protective form, but instead of rising, the edges of his zone started collapsing. He had no clue what went wrong. Then he calmed down and stopped letting the noise around him distract him. Outside or inside the zone, it shouldn't matter. Something else had caused the failure. That was when he realized his mistake. The teacher had reshaped her zone in a calm, natural way. Everyone focuses when changing his zone's shape, and he'd been doing the same while trying to shrink his. So if the problem was forcing it too small, then he just needed to let it settle at its normal size. The moment he did, his zone surged outward, shocking everyone even more. It reached 41 meters, and even Amy was stunned. Once Chiron realized his zone wanted that size, he stunned Firemit. That's when the students saw that he had formed one of the protective shapes on his very first day. Looking at it, Chiron felt like he was standing inside a jewel. The teacher was just as stunned as the class. She had heard Chiron amaze the staff during the entrance exam, but this was still unbelievable. Amy's red-haired friend asked if Chiron was really that special. Almost no one could do this on day one. Then she added that he was pretty cute too. Amy, though, looked awful, pale and sweating. She finally understood that Chiron was the boy tied to the humiliation she had tried to bury. Seeing him now, she couldn't believe he'd become this skilled without help. But she also saw the danger. He was closing the gap in power way too fast, and his influence would only grow. Her only option now was to get close to him. The teacher was amazed too. Chiron handled his power like someone who had trained for years. Then Chiron spoke up, pulling her out of her thoughts. He asked why his zone had gotten smaller. She told him not to worry. That was normal. When his zone shrinks, it gets denser. At his level of density, the form could resist almost any physical attack, and even magic would have a hard time breaking through. After praising him, the teacher told him to release the zone. As soon as he came back to his senses, he heard students around him calling him amazing. He didn't get why everyone was staring, but he thanked them and hurried off. The teacher smiled. She could see how sharp Chiron had been in making the form. Though his convergent type and huge zone clearly helped, for now, she decided to keep watching him and he walked away, red with embarrassment. After all, countless eyes were fixed on him, full of different emotions: challenge, curiosity, admiration, and envy. But one stare mattered most, the eerie one from Amy. The next day, another intense gaze followed Chiron. This time, it came from the scary teacher from the entrance test, Sina Oliver. Chiron hadn't known she taught 5th years and was spending her free time with the 7th grade on purpose. As she set her materials on the desk, she thought the staff's to 7 was strained. They could have moved Chiron straight to the 5th grade, and he would have caught up sooner or later. So Sina Oliver decided she'd train him herself and push him ahead quickly. Chiron noticed she kept looking at him, but brushed it off as his imagination. Then she smiled and formed a small chunk of ice in her hand. She asked the class to explain the spell. What exactly were cold and freezing? The room grew chilly enough to make everyone shiver, but she said that wasn't because of some cold energy. Because energy can keep increasing, but it can't last forever. The point where nothing is left is called absolute zero. Take energy away from something at room temperature, and you can make ice crystals. Then she asked what would happen if that energy were split into tiny particles and turned into a flowing current. When no one answered, she gave it to them plainly. They could create temperatures low enough to kill, and when she added that this had been tested before, the room got even more uneasy. Her next question was simple. How does a magician draw in energy and use it? She drew on the board and explained that inside a zone, a magician can control the world there. Within that space, a mage is almost like a god, able to interact with light, smell, touch, and more, shaping reality itself. But even with that power, most people don't fully understand what they can do. To cast spells, a mage needs godlike traits, power, and knowledge. That's what magic rests on, so raw strength alone is never enough. Mages need the strength of their own works, almost like scientists. Chiron realized that was why he still couldn't really use magic. He had developed the power side, but not the knowledge side. Sina told the class not to panic. This school would teach them the rest. The zone was only half of magic, and anyone who didn't study hard would never become a real magician. With that, she began a basic chemistry lesson. Chiron listened closely and realized becoming a magician might actually be easier than he had feared. After classes ended, Sem steered might actually Sem rested and understood in the library. Chiron was there every day. Even then, he was barely keeping up with the aristocrats, and the lack of sleep was wearing him down. Still, he liked studying because he wanted to reach his one dream. He even wondered if someone had invented a spell to remove the need for sleep. Then suddenly his body lifted, turning strangely light. He looked down and saw that he was floating in the air. Before he could figure out why, he spotted a hooded person behind him carrying him off toward the woods. A moment later, he was propped hard on the ground. The figure poured back the hood, and Amy was standing there. Chiron had figured they would meet again someday, but not this soon. He knew for sure now. She was the same girl from 5 years ago. Amy read his face at once and said he clearly remembered her. Chiron still didn't know what she wanted, but Amy raised a hand and summoned fire, aiming it at him as she said that if he remembered, then maybe she needed to finish him here. That threat brought back the memory of the alley and the people who had hurt him. Amy remembered that back then, she had almost let him go, and when he started crying, she wanted to see him cry even more. Now, though, he had completely changed. She couldn't stop wondering if this was really the same boy from 5 years ago. Chiron rose instead. Of course he remembered. She was the one who told those thugs to strip him. Amy instantly cut him off, saying that wasn't how it happened at all. It was a misunderstanding. Blushing, she nervously asked if he really thought she was some kind of pervert. That answer hit Chiron completely off guard. She rushed to explain that the thugs had wanted to strip him, not her, and she never honored it. But Chiron fired back that she still wanted to see what was under his clothes. She turned red and stumbled over her words, then admitted she'd never cared about boys before. Vincent figured that was why she brought him here, to explain herself. Amy didn't even know why she was trying so hard. He guessed she was scared he'd spread rumors, and that fear was eating at both of them. So he asked if she just wanted to say one simple thing, sorry. Amy looked confused, and Vincent told her he got. She wanted that erased. But no matter how popular she was, or how perfect everyone thought she was, the past wasn't changing. Wouldn't it be easier to just apologize instead of making excuses? Amy couldn't stay focused. To her, Vincent was trying to use words to corner her. Nobody solves things that easily. She took it like a challenge and wondered what kind of person he thought she was. Then she smiled and asked what she would gain from apologizing. Vincent didn't follow, so Amy repeated herself. What exactly awakens she said sorry? How could she trust him to stay quiet? An apology would be admitting guilt, and that only put her at risk. Vincent answered that an apology isn't supposed to get you something. It's basic decency when you hurt someone. Amy laughed and asked if he really thought the world worked that simply. Even though this was only a war of words, she chose to strike back. Why waste her effort if she got nothing out of it? So she warned that life at the academy could get very hard for him if she stopped leaving Chiron alone. Vincent saw right away that her fake, perfect Chiron act didn't change who she really was. Looking for another way to scare him, Amy asked if he knew the most dangerous thing in the school. His face gave away that he had no clue. She told him it was the upperclassmen. If he crossed them, he'd be finished. All anyone would hear is that some commoner broke school rules. Vincent asked what she actually wanted, his explosion or just silence. Amy played it off and said she'd wait for now. She'd watch Chiron first, and only then decide if he could be trusted. She added that even getting into this place was hard for a commoner, so getting expelled would be a shame. Vincent accepted the deal and agreed to play along if that meant staying in school. But she ended with a threat. If he told anyone, she'd kill him herself. Vincent already felt this would turn into a disaster. The next morning, with everyone staring, he brought her coffee. Amy smiled, while her friends looked confused and excited. She quickly grabbed the cup, nearly dropped it, and hurried off. One of her friends asked if she was really not going to say anything bad, but Amy brushed it off and left for cleanse. Vincent guessed everyone probably thought he had confessed to Amy. Her friend teased her, asking if he was actually her type. Amy said she was just training some coolest younger student, but inside, she wasn't calm at all. Maybe she enjoyed putting Vincent down, or maybe she liked the attention more than she wanted to admit. She told herself this was perfect. If he ended up looking like some middle school kid with a hopeless crush, then even if he talked, no one would believe him. To Amy, that felt like the bus script than he's possible. And with him to 5 years ago, that like seemed lighter, and she loved it. Vincent knew this was bullying. If he let his feelings control him, he'd be the only one hurt. Still, Amy not trusting him didn't matter. He'd give her all the confidence she needed, and do it perfectly. So everything now depended on how smart he played this, and he started putting his plan into motion. Even 10 days later, Vincent was still showing up with coffee. The girls loved the whole thing, and started calling him the academy's biggest romantic. Everyone was talking about how he was going to confess for the 10th time in a row. Amy loved it, especially since the crowd was even bigger than before. With that many people watching, she figured she shouldn't act suspicious. Better to end it quietly. Then one of her friends asked when she was finally going to return his feelings. That question hit Amy hard. She asked if her friend really saw her as a girl interested in boys. But the answer came fast. Rumors spread because she never even looked at guys. Yet she took coffee from Vincent almost every day. Now the whole academy was waiting for some legendary couple to happen. Amy snapped back to the moment and saw Vincent standing there again with another cup. The crowd started chanting for the coffee. Vincent even gave a weird little grin and pointed out that he hadn't spilled it this time, though he clearly wanted to get back to the library. For maybe the first time at school, Amy blushed in front of everyone. She couldn't tell if he was making fun of her. This time, she knocked the drink away and snapped, asking how many times he planned to keep doing this. Then she shouted for everyone to hear. Did he really think bringing her favorite coffee meant she'd fall for him? She went on, calling Shiran a lazy student who didn't study and just chewed call her end. If she fall for him never to bring a student coffee again. Her friend quickly stepped in to calm things down, then followed Amy and asked what she'd do if ugly rumors started because of this. Red-faced, Amy insisted nobody cared. People were just bored. She told herself it would all die out once the graduating class became the next hot topic. But the crowd took Vincent's side and thought Amy had gone too far. Seeing that, he quietly celebrated. Maybe he should keep this up after all. So while everyone pitied him and said he'd been crushed, Vincent was honestly enjoying himself. Later that day, Amy sat in the library, unable to focus on her work. She couldn't understand how this had gotten so out of hand. She only wanted to stop a new student from spreading rumors, but somehow she had created bigger ones herself. She thought she'd wrapped it up cleanly, yet now it bothered her more than she expected. Because of her sharp memory, she could replay exactly how she felt in each moment. So she went back to the first day Vincent brought her coffee. At first, she felt he looked ridiculous. Day after day, his eyes never changed. His pupils didn't even shift. That made no sense to her. People can hide their feelings, but their eyes usually give something away. Those reactions aren't easy to control. So if Shiran could keep his eyes that steady, then either he had amazing control over his emotions, or he was completely sincere. That evening, while studying with a friend, she was asked if she was leaving since it was already late. Her friend invited her to dinner, but Amy said no. Noticing she was off, the friend asked if this was because she hadn't taken coffee from Vincent. Amy tried to deny it, but the teasing wouldn't stop. The friend told her to be honest, then left anyway. Amy was exhausted. Nothing had gone the way she planned, and her head was a mess. When she stepped outside, she saw a guy she knew waiting for her. It was Aryan Shiran. Amy asked why he was there. Was he really that bored? He told her to be less rude, saying he'd heard rumors that Shiran was into her. Amy asked if he came just to laugh at her, but instead he offered a cup and said he brought much better coffee than Vincent ever had. According to him, this was the coffee someone as amazing as Amy deserved. She had no idea what game he was playing. Then he started bragging, saying he was the heir to the royal marshal's court. Unlike that bastard, Amy coldly told him she wasn't in the mood for those jokes. She asked since when they were close enough for that kind of talk. She knew very well Aryan Shiran's group would gladly see new year with that kind of chance. He blocked her path and said insulting him was the same as insulting his family. He wouldn't let even someone from the Karmi's family staying their name. Amy shot back that he was a pathetic bastard and way too full of himself. She called him a clown who shamed his own family. The same loser who made that nasty group that secretly poisoned people. That set him off. He asked if she understood how much power his family held over hers. Then he dropped the nice act and warned that his family could bankrupt the Karmi's family whatever they warned. In that moment, Amy realized just how much rage he was hiding. And unlike Vincent, his eyes looked dead, like rotten fish. He asked if she really thought he was worse than Vincent. If that was true, then he'd handle things differently. He said he'd make sure Vincent could never use magic again. But he didn't even get to finish. Amy slapped the coffee cup right out of his hand. He was about to insult her, then felt the air turn tense. A target form circle appeared under Amy. She turned tensely serious and asked what exactly he planned to do. Drake was too shaken to answer. He couldn't believe her whole presence changed that fast. He tried to remind her magic wasn't allowed at school, but Amy shot back that Shirin relied on himself, not his family. Then she said a trash guy like him wouldn't dare do anything, no matter how nice his face looked. Drake knew that if he stepped into her range, she'd burn him alive. He was way weaker, so he backed off and ran, planning revenge for later. Amy leaned against the wall after he left, confused by her own reaction. Was she scared? We're scared he'd learn her secret. Then Sharon's promise flashed through her mind. He'd earned her trust. Seeing the spilled coffee, she suddenly worried he might stop coming to her. Still, one thing was clear now. A few days later, that small clash Amy caused blew up into real trouble. One of Amy's friends dragged Shirin to the gym because of it. The message claimed it was from the dark magician. Shirin had thought the whole mess was already over. He figured Amy might keep picking on him, but he still wasn't sure what to expect. Then he noticed Amy wasn't there, only her friend Sarah. Feeling that something was wrong, he walked over. The moment he got close, she started shouting in panic, and he yelled too. She demanded to know where Amy was, but Shirin had no clue what she meant, so Sarah handed him a letter. Amy had to come to Hall 14 by 6 p.m., or Shirin would be castrated. It also warned her not to tell any teachers, or she'd regret it forever. Shirin asked who this so-called dark magician was. Half an hour earlier, Amy had been stopped by some guy, and she snapped, asking how he dared talk to her. He told her to watch her tone, handed over a letter, and said his boss wanted to meet her. Amy was ready to ignore him, but then he said her boyfriend would die if she didn't. That made her freeze. Once she read the note, she knew Jake was behind it. Sarah read it too and wondered who this dark magician really was. Maybe just the usual thugs. Was it the same punks who arrest good students? And why target Shiren? Amy guessed it was because two fell pugs before. Cyril urged her to tell the teachers, since both she and Shiren could be in danger. Amy knew that made sense, but if she did, the professors would get involved and she'd have to explain her connection to Shiren. Then everyone would learn he was just a commoner. Realizing how badly she treated him, Amy chose another way. She told Cyril she'd go alone, and if she wasn't back by 7, then she could tell her parents everything. Cyril shouted that she couldn't face a whole group by herself. Amy had her reasons. She told her not to worry. Even 10 bastards like Jake wouldn't have thinked her. After reading the letter, Sharon felt strangely shaken. He couldn't believe Amy would actually come save him. For the first time, he thought maybe she wasn't that bad. He asked Sarah where Amy went. Sarah said Amy had her reasons, and begged him to wait until 7, when the teachers could step in. Sharon knew this wasn't simple, but they still had an hour, and he realized why Amy hadn't told the teachers. Their secrets were tied together. That made him think she was protecting him. He handed this bide to Cyril and think she was wait him till the deadline. He was going after Amy himself. He tried to run off, but she grabbed him. Cyril said he'd never make it on foot. Then she explained they'd travel by photons and told him to hold tight. A yellow light wrapped around him. In an instant, they were gone, shooting toward the forest. When they landed, Shiren threw up, but Sarah kept running toward the training grounds. She looked around and saw no one. Maybe they were 10 minutes early. Shiren said the kidnappers might have picked another spot in case teachers were told. Still, he was sure Amy would ken here. His pots didn't mother right now. Amy was in more danger than he was, so he told Sarah to warn his parents. She could get there faster. Sarah reminded him Amy told him to wait, but Sharon said this was happening because of him, so he had to help. That left her unsure. For a second, Sarah got lost in thought. Was Sharon really this important to Amy? Had they been involved for a long time without anyone knowing? Sharon cut that off and said this wasn't the time. They were in real danger. Once he was alone, he activated his own. He needed to use a fine moments, and he needed even one clue. Soon he found fresh footprints from 2 people. Then halfway along, he heard something ahead. Deeper in the woods, Amy was already fighting. 4 more boys showed up, surprised she had really come. Just like their boss said, Jake told them to show more respect to an important guest like Amy. Amy wasn't amused. To her, they were just losers with too much free time. Jake mocked her for coming alone. Had she really risked herself for Shiren? Amy answered that he'd really burned down a house just to kill rats. That stung Jake. He hadn't expected her to be this loyal, but he said he came prepared. Amy only asked where Shiren was. Their laughter answered that fast. Shiren probably wasn't there at all. They mocked him, saying he was likely still buried in his books. Amy laughed too and said that if Shiren wasn't here, wiping them out would be easy. Jake could barely believe she was really about to attack. Then flames burst from every side and set the group on fire, proving Amy had no interest in playing along. Jake said her target form wasn't perfect, so they just needed to move fast and keep pressure on her. It didn't help. Amy kept landing hits and shutting down their dodges. She used target form with almost no openings. Amy knew this was nothing like practice in the training room, because she had real combat experience. Jake still believed every technique had a weakness. He went for a vertical strike and fired a wind blade at her. He thought he had her, but Amy slipped past it. Calling it a cheap trick, she cattered at once and blasted Jake with fire. Jake cursed at her, calling her insane, and complained he was wasting time on this crap when his grades were already bad enough. Pointing at her, he swore she'd pay. Amy wasn't moved by his trash talk and had no plan to let him off. But then Jake's spell hit her right in the eye. The pain was unbearable, and she had no idea what he'd done. The others laughed when they saw she'd been caught. They figured she'd lose control if she didn't drop her zone, because Jake had put her under anti-magic. Amy couldn't believe a creep like him could use forbidden magic. She instantly knew how bad this was. She couldn't even heal with her red eyes. Then wind vapor lifted her into the air and bound her. Jake asked if she was finally ready to accept the offer he made yesterday. For her own sake, he said, she'd better answer right. The truth was, Jake had wanted her for himself all along. Amy trembled because she couldn't do anything. Her secretary failed too. She'd stopped training it after age 12. Even so, she kept searching for a way out. Jake kept talking, saying she still didn't get how bad things were and that guys only chased girls who gave them a reason. Then he said only he had girls reeled her face, and no one would want her anymore. He pressed a dagger near her face. Amy shut her eyes, bracing for the worst. As her strength faded, she finally understood how helpless Sharon must have felt when he'd been held down. Then Sharon appeared and shouted for them to stop. He was holding only a stick. Jake stared, not even sure who this fool was. Amy, though, recognized him at once. Jake burst out laughing. Sharon had come alone. The others mocked him too, like some prince trying to fight with a branch. Amy told he was an idiot. But Sharon said there was no way these nobodies should be able to beat the top student in their academy this easily. Still, his real goal was to buy time. He had beaten Ryan in a duel before, and now he meant to hold out here too. He leveled the stick at the group and told them to back off. Jake refused. Our hero rushed straight at them, but the boys instantly triggered anti-magic. His power shut down, and they burst out laughing. They were sure he'd collapse. There was no way he could do anything with just a stoke. Amy yelled for him to get out of the zone because it was anti-magic. If he stayed any longer, she warned, he could lose his magic and lose his mind. His thoughts started breaking apart more with every second. Then his teacher's words came back to him. A wizard just has to focus. He realized his own form could protect him. Anti-magic and zones were just waves, so if he made his form dense enough that those waves couldn't enter, he could hold out. The others noticed he was resisting, but instead of worrying, they poured in even more power. Amy kept begging him to stop and give up. Then he finally broke through, and he didn't stop there. He pushed his form even further. Jake suddenly noticed the anti-magic waves were bouncing back at them, so he told everyone to focus and not let Sharon win. But our hero attacked first, and the anti-magic started hitting every enemy inside the zone. They all dropped in pain, while Amy could only stare, confused. She didn't know if she was outside the effect or if something else had happened. She only knew the anti-magic was gone. What amazed her even more was our hero himself. She had never imagined a zone that cold and solid. At the same time, he could feel every tiny movement under his feet, like stepping on a small worm. Jake, slumped against the oak, couldn't believe what he had just seen. How had 6 of them lost to one person? They even started thinking he specialized in anti-magic, and that was why he got into the school by special recommendation. Jake snapped and shouted, asking if Sharon really thought he could beat him in a magic duel. He had been sure it would be easy, since our hero supposedly couldn't if magic. But before he could do anything, Amy punched him in the face and sent him flying. She still wasn't done. Amy kept attacking and beating him until our hero tried to stop her. She wouldn't calm down, so he grabbed her and pulled her away. But the moment he did, she passed out, leaving him uneasy. Seeing Amy unconscious, he guessed she had fainted from pure exhaustion. Then our hero quietly thanked her, and Amy woke up right away, clearly embarrassed. She asked how he got dragged into this, and told him to leave if her teacher caught in. But he said Carl should be her sin, because he had asked her to tell Amy's parents even though Amy told her not to. Amy grabbed her head and said it would only get worse if the academy got involved. He didn't understand how things worked here. Once this started, every wizard would dig into the exact reason, and nothing would stay hidden. She shouted, asking if he really wanted their secret exposed. He said that didn't matter. They had almost died. Jake, still conscious, heard everything and realized the 2 of them were hiding something. Amy urged our hero to leave Ryan, but it was already too late. The teachers were coming. She prayed it would be the old teacher who usually let things slide. Instead, it was Ted and Sina, the 2 teachers she feared most. Serial was with them too and ran straight to Amy. She was worried sick, while Ted used a complex spell, saw the students down on the ground, and rushed over, asking how Amy ended up like this. Sina went to Sharon and said they came as soon as they heard. So what happened? Jake jumped in first and asked to explain. He claimed it was just a duel caused by personal grudges, the kind kids their age often had. Sina wasn't buying it. She said she'd heard there was a threatening letter and that several of them had used anti-magic. Did Jake even know the school rules? He tried to defend himself, saying Amy was too strong, so they used anti-magic against her. Then he pointed out that his group looked more injured, added that Amy had broken the rules first by attacking him outside the library, and said that was why he challenged her and got angry. He also asked why she never told the teachers and why she was so innocent. Amy fired back that he had threatened her and wrote that he would kidnap Sharon. Jake answered that they never attacked her first, and Sharon hadn't been kidnapped at all. Instead of calling teachers, Sharon ran there himself. So, according to Jake, our hero and Amy were the ones hiding something. He flat out declared them the real culprits. Jake demanded the truth, smug and pleased with himself, convinced his power would protect him. He also meant to blow this whole thing up, no matter the cost. Once they exposed this secret, he bragged. Local papers, national groups, even the church would hear about it. Sina cut him off and said that was enough nonsense. He and his friends were the ones who used anti-magic as an attack, fully aware it could destroy Amy's mind or harm our hero badly enough to kill them. For her, that was more than enough reason to act. Jake laughed and asked if she knew who he was. No teacher could expel him. Ted started to calm things down, saying Jake's family was a major support for the academy. But Sina started him and asked if a teacher's down wasn't to protect students for thwarts. She said that even if his family cut the academy's funding, they'd still be better off without him. Jake screamed that they'd soon find out who really got thrown out. In his mind, money ruled the world and everyone would bow to his family. They only had to wait and see. But Sina was beyond angry now. Before expelling him, she decided to teach him a lesson. She cast a spell, and Jake panicked, screaming at her not to kill a student. A block of ice closed around him, lined with ship spikes inside. Our hero was shocked that the spell didn't touch Jake's body or even his clothes. The control was so exact that not a single detail was off. That was why people called her a genius of ice magic. Standing over him, Sina asked if he really thought money alone could carry him to the top. All he could do was beg her to let him down. She released the spell and said she knew he had already hurt many other students. The academy had ignored it and never punished him properly. Jake shouted that it was because his family was rich. Sina told him that to get the raw ID. Academy was not a place where people learned through money. It taught something money could never buy. When he asked what that was, she answered at once, their dream. The dream of becoming a wizard. Those words brought a memory back to Jake. He remembered first coming to Sina, sharing that dream with the other students, all of them wanting to become magicians. Wasn't that what this whole path was about? And now he was the one trying to ruin those precious memories. Jake lowered his head, realizing what he had done, and protested. In the end, that dream had always meant the most to them. After this, Jake of the others would truly repent and want to become real wizards again. But that came later. For now, their injuries were treated, and they were sent to the punishment chamber for what they had done. Then the inevitable happened. Our hero and Amy sat in the counseling room, where they were asked why they hadn't reported everything sooner. The teacher said the first thing students should do is run for help, not charge in alone to rescue a talented upperclassman. To demented a real explanation. Amy decided to tell the truth, and our hero knew they couldn't hide it forever. He still didn't know who the principal had told about his origin, but Amy suddenly said our hero was her boyfriend. That shocked every teacher in the room, including Serial. Serial instantly started putting things together and remembered Amy crying out for help. The thugs had thought no one would come, but in Serial's imagination, Sharon appeared like a prince on a white horse and took down all the enemies with one kick. Then he turned to Amy and declared he'd go to the ends with the earth zone. He swept her into his arms like a proper lady and almost kissed her, while all the girls squealed, and Carl insisted she saw it with her own eyes. Right then, Amy came up behind her and asked what kind of rumor she was spreading. Soon, the whole academy was talking and posting about Sharon and Amy's new relationship. Amy told her friend not to spread it because it was not true. Still, her friend was thrilled, already imagining the two meeting in secret, and maybe even kissing. In her eyes, Amy should be happy too. Now annoying guys might finally leave her alone. Later that day, the teachers questioned Amy. They find it hard to believe, said she nourished her nature's kind Amy boy at the academy. Amy answered that she had known Sharon from before, back when they were younger, so meeting again at the academy felt like fate. Then she shot Sharon a strange look that made him start sweating. Under the table, she nudged his foot to make him play along. He quickly backed up her story. The teachers accepted it, since that would explain why Sharon rushed off to save Amy. For her, this lie was still better than letting their real past come out. Amy stayed lost in thought the whole time. But at dinner, Serial burst out, saying she knew it for the stirred. She even reminded Amy they had class together that day, so she would get to see Sharon. The moment they entered the hall, Serial started firing questions at her friend. Was she going to meet him after class, eat dinner with him, or maybe even go on a library date? Amy forced a laugh and said they wanted to focus on studying like proper students. That answer only disappointed Serial, who wanted something much more exciting. Amy knew Sharon already had too much on his plate, and he deserved a quiet school life. She even caught herself smiling at the thought he was doing well, then quickly denied liking that feeling at all. At the second training ground, Amy called out to Sharon and teasingly asked how his day was, and whether he missed her. Embarrassed, he asked her to stop joking like that. Amy did not like his reaction. She knew they were only pretending, but it felt like Sharon had still drawn a line between them, and she could not understand why that bothered her so much. So she walked up to him and said they did not need to act like strangers. They knew each other far better than ordinary classmates. Serial was basically floating with joy. Hearing Amy say something like that for the first time made her wonder if this was what love really looked like. Amy kept up the act and called them a couple, but Sharon stood firm. He reminded her she was still an upperclassman, then headed back to his own group. Sharon already knew this whole thing would end badly. People loved gossip too much, and they were sure to make it bigger than it was. Some even claimed he got into the academy just because of his face and spent it with just bathing instead of studying. That was also why students started guessing why he still could not use magic. Sharon was trembling because just 2 days earlier, rumors had started spreading that Amy was seeing him, and plenty of students were upset they never had a chance with her. Others were jealous that he had caught so much attention. Then one student openly turned against him, calling Sharon suspicious and pointing out that he ranked last on the midterms. He was last in his class, with only 30 points in every subject. Nobody complained, so that they made an explanation. The students quickly decided Sharon must have been admitted under special treatment. They said some powerful family got him in after calling him a genius, and in their eyes, he had only come here to chase a girl from a famous family. That sparked a full wave of complaints. People said it was unfair for someone like him to enter the academy without earning it, and then start dating one of the girls on top of that. They called the whole thing suspicious, saying Sharon did not work nearly as hard as everyone else. To them, the academy had no excuse for letting it slide. But the second Sharon walked into the classroom, it all went quiet. Even so, he knew there had been a lot of noise before he arrived. He tried asking a boy what the next class was, but the student turned away and left. Sharon did not need to ask what was going on. They had been talking loudly enough for him to hear. Worse, Amy might get hurt because of him. Later, everyone gathered in the training room for class practice. Even while training, Sharon kept catching bits of the conversations around him. His zone spread wide of to catch everything, which admitted contre-traineur. When the teacher came over and asked how he was doing, Sharon admitted the evasion form was hard for him. Whenever he tried to separate the zone from his body, it felt like his mind was being pulled out with it. The teacher explained that made sense. His convergent type matched his nature, so his mind naturally gathered into a sphere. That type did not pair well with evasion, since it needed more control. Still, she asked about the other forms, and Sharon said those gave him no trouble. Hearing that, she was pleased. She asked him of Sharon's skills in the visible zone. Sharon could hardly believe she wanted it right there, in front of everyone staring at him. But she added that they could wait, if he was not ready. After all, he was the only 7th grader who could use all 4 forms, and she really wanted to see them. The teacher guessed he was worried about how the others would react. Still, she reminded him that someone who knows his value should not be shaken by that. Those words gave Sharon the push he needed, and he asked her to judge his performance. The other students he needed to notice he was torn again. Some mocked him, thinking he was only showing off for Amy because that was all he was good for. The teacher told him to display all 4 forms one by one. Sharon knew changing forms was one of the requirements to move up to the next class, so even a little progress could help him leave 7th class behind and improve his standing. He started with the protection form, which Amy noticed had grown much stronger. Everyone could see the 144-faced shape was top tier, more like armor than a simple shield. His target form was solid too. The teacher could tell he had mastered the basics and switched forms faster than a 5th grader, so promotion would not be a problem. Then came the evasion form, the one he still struggled with. He hated showing that weakness, but to follow her instructions, he had to try. Now the whole room watched him attempt the evasion form, including all the 5th graders. He knew the key was reaching the center of his zone before it shrank and vanished. He tried to control it just like he had in practice, lost focus for a moment, and prepared to try again. Then he noticed the looks around him and imagined everyone laughing at him. Amy could tell something was wrong. It had been doing well before, and even Serial noticed his zone was shaking, probably from all the attention. Sharon wondered why people enjoyed seeing others fail, then why they wanted him to fail so badly. Deep down, he already knew. Then a voice in his head told him to quit thinking such nonsense. That snapped him back. He remembered why he came to this academy in the first place. The competition. Nothing else mattered. The moment he focused, his zone started to change. Everyone stared in shock, while Sharon wondered if it would finally separate from him or just vanish again. We do not see the result yet, because the story cuts to the same teacher who once helped the students. She reads a report and sees that Sharon resisted anti-magic with nothing but a normal protection form. That alone was shocking. Anti-magic was so dangerous and hard to handle that even experts needed an artifact to use it safely. So even if the attackers used it poorly, Susto cannot understand how Sharon beat 6 students. That would mean his mental power was greater than all of theirs combined. The question was whether that strength was natural talent. Just then, Sharon was visited by the same teacher who had trained him in the forms. She came with good news. He had successfully used the evasion form. He had pulled it off yesterday, even though he had only started learning it 1 day earlier. Thanks to the visible zone, she had seen him hold it for about 4 seconds. Sina was pleased, since she had expected that much from him. The teacher then suggested giving the students and expected to motivate them more, and Sina agreed. So a few days later, during chemistry class, Sina ended the lesson early to make an important announcement. She called on Sharon to stand and announced he'd be moved up to 5th grade. He would start tomorrow, so she told him to remember the new class scheduled. The whole room exploded in shock. They couldn't believe he was skipping 2 grades at once. They started wondering what kind of pull his family had with the school. Before the teacher could leave, one girl spoke up and objected, saying a jump like this was almost unheard of. She asked how someone who still couldn't use magic was supposed to move up early. Sina was stunned too. How could Chiron still be unable to cast spells? She asked if it was true, and with all those old looks of doubt flashing through his mind again, he admitted it was. That surprised her, since most kids pick up at least basic magic out of curiosity. Even so, she pointed out that 6th grade doesn't grade spell use, so it wouldn't block his transfer. Then another student stood and called the whole thing unfair. He reminded the teacher that a zone isn't the same as magic and demanded to know what Chiron was actually good at. He said he could accept it if Chiron could at least cast something. The nasty kid quickly got the class on his side. They claimed they could also pass him, and if he transferred, they'd report it to the student council. That was when Sina realized this wasn't just normal complaining. Something deeper was going on. So she said she'd acted too fast and would review it first, with the final decision coming after the teachers' meeting. The boy who started it looked thrilled that he'd gotten his way. Later, in her office, Sina kept thinking about how furious the class had been. She hadn't expected that kind of backlash unless personal issues were mixed in. Then the one girl who hadn't joined in came to speak with her. She decided to tell Sina what had really been happening. According to her, it started about a week earlier. At first, the class just ignored her on. Then it got worse. They spread rumors and even tried to disrupt his studies. She said she ignored exactly who had been studying the gossip and turning others against him. Tears filled her eyes. She knew rumors were cruel, and worse, they were cowardly. Looking at the girl, Sina finally understood the situation. She thanked her student, Maria, and promised she'd handle the rest herself. Meanwhile, our hero thought back to something he'd read from a talk between great scientists. One physicist, Torklian, said people need 6 hours of sleep, even though he only slept 4. When someone asked if that made his ideas less reliable, he joked that teenagers were basically superhuman, so sleep didn't add much to them. Then Chiron checked the time and thought it was already late. He left the library and headed back, thinking as he walked. He remembered Fumar's warning that once he entered the academy, people would look down on him, but if he endured it, he could still reach his goal. Chiron decided he could handle anything because too many people believed in him. No matter who stood in his way, he would become a magician. When he got back to his room, someone knocked. He wondered who would come this late. Maybe those kids again. Instead, it was Kid Sina. Come up guard, he invited her in and offered tea. She declined and apologized for visiting so late, explaining she wanted to talk but had missed him earlier. Then her eyes fell on his desk, and she understood even more. When she first checked his grades, she noticed every subject was almost even. That told her Chiron was trying to build up all his knowledge at once. He wasn't chasing quick results, and it wasn't that he couldn't study magic. He was choosing to delay it. Still, she wondered why. Why hadn't he gotten a proper education earlier? The question clearly caught an uproar. Sina noticed he was calmer here than in class. This time, he listened closely and didn't avoid her gaze. He'd already shown the answer in his own way. Learning was hard for him, but he truly loved being in this place. Then Sina got to the real issue and asked if he was being bullied. Chiron said everything was fine and nobody needed to worry. She pressed him to be honest, reminding him teachers were there to help, but he still felt he couldn't change how others treated him. Sina couldn't believe he seemed so unaffected by it, but Chiron explained he wasn't numb. He just knew he couldn't force people to like him. He would stay true to himself and not get stuck on. Even if all 40 students in his class thought he was wrong, that was still only 40 opinions. Somewhere in the world, someone would understand him. Sina smiled, said she understood, and promised to keep that in mind at the meeting. At the teachers' meeting, she brought it up right away and said Chiron wanted to move up early. The teachers were shocked to hear that one student had been mocked by an entire class. Still, some noted that in lower grades, weak or untalented students often get looked down on, so they understood why Chiron had taken a target. With everything laid out, they agreed it was discrimination. Even so, they still had to decide whether his transfer should be approved. Some even argued he might graduate in 4 years, and more young graduates would be good for the academy. Then Professor Ted stood up again, and Sina immediately knew trouble was coming. The headmaster asked if he opposed the transfer. Ted said he knew Chiron was talented, but the real problem was simple. He still couldn't use magic. Ignoring the other students' reactions, in his view, was a bad idea. Sina cut in at once, reminding everyone that Chiron had chosen to focus on knowledge first and set magic aside for now. A teacher, she said, shouldn't interfere with a student's learning plan. Ted stopped her and said that wasn't his point. What bothered him was her obvious bias toward Chiron, which Sina refused to accept. so he went on, arguing that maybe the other students looked weaker only because Chiron was exceptional in other areas. If the school rewarded just that one kind of strength, he warned, it could hurt the rest of the students and kill the majority learned. With a smile, he asked whether it was really wise to pour everything into one genius. Sina was furious. Ted sounded like he wanted to sabotage a gifted student. Everyone in the room could tell the usual Ted versus Sina fight was starting again. The other teachers just held their heads, wondering how people with personalities like these had become wizards in the first place. Then the headmaster finally stepped in and said that was enough. They could settle this without a war. He said both sides had valid points. Sina was thinking logically, but Ted's concern for balance among the students also mattered. The academy couldn't show open favoritism. Ted started to think he had won, while Sina looked disappointed. But the headmaster's cheerful expression made it clear he had already come up with an answer. The next morning, a new notice appeared on the board for the upper classes. Students gathered around it in shock. The announcement said every 7th grader would now have a chance to move up. The main test would be teleportation magic. That scared many of them, since teleportation was known to be extremely hard. When Chiron read it, he understood that from now on, he'd be fighting for promotion too. Soon everyone, even older students, heard about the 7th grade loner at the center of it all. By the end of class, the whole school knew what was coming, and that it had started because of him. Amy overheard everything, and realized Sharon had been bullied because of her. That was why he'd been avoiding her. He didn't want to drag her in. Carl said it through, and figured the 7th graders were just immature, which was why they'd pinned it all on him. It easily could have happened to her too if she hadn't transferred in time. Then Amy suddenly took off somewhere, and Carl shouted after her, asking where she was going. Amy answered that she was going to beat some sense into him. How could Chiron keep something like this quiet? And now he'd even drawn the whole 7th grade into it. Carl tried to stop her, but Amy snapped back. Did she really want the guy she loved to stay an outcast? Carl warned that barging in would only wound this pride more, that Amy didn't care. Maybe he didn't even like her, but why hide something this serious? Then she thought about the teleportation test and got shaken. Teleportation was hard and dangerous, especially for someone who hadn't studied magic till now. Carl had suggested teaching Chiron herself, but with exams coming, there just wasn't enough time. Amy even muttered that if he couldn't learn it, then he wasn't fit to be her boyfriend. That evening, she flew around the towers on her way to Chiron's room. She couldn't tell herself she wasn't doing it for him, just because she was inviolate. Still, before anything else, she wanted him to beg for forgiveness. She burst in through the window and clamped a hand over his mouth so he wouldn't yell. Amy started to say she was there to kick his butt, but then she noticed teacher Sina was already in the room. Sina teased Amy, asking if this was how they usually met. Did she sneak into his room every night? Amy turned red and quickly said it was all a misunderstanding. Sina just smiled, saying that explained why Amy and Sharon had been acting since just entered school. Flustered, Amy insisted this was her first time doing anything like this, and that Chiron was the one who told her they shouldn't meet at school. Then she fired back, asking why a teacher was in his room so late. Sina said she came to help with the exam since the class was in a tough spot. Chiron quietly handed Amy some tea, and the smell alone calmed her a little. That lasted about a second. Then she started scolding him for letting himself be humiliated and for hiding him from her. Sina cut in and suggested they sit down, reminding him that mattered more right now. Sharon sat there completely lost. His teacher and the girl he liked were both beside him. Amy asked if practicing teleportation was even safe for someone who had never learned magic. Sina admitted she was worried too, but said the principal must have had a reason for choosing this test. Amy couldn't believe anyone would treat something like this lightly, so Sharon asked the question directly. Is teleportation really that dangerous? Amy explained that teleportation uses light magic. Since light moves faster than anything else, the spell borrows that speed. That speed lets a person break through space and time to move instantly. Sharon asked if a human body could really be turned into light. Sina said it sounded wild, but even a beginner could learn teleportation. She went on with the theory, explaining that light speed is split into 4 stages, and teleportation depends on controlling light magic. Because of that, the body smash traps in lot during the spell. Sharon quickly realized that meant a huge risk of crashing into something. Sina praised him for catching on so fast. Amy, a little jealous of how easily they clicked, cut in while Sharon asked how the school could make such a dangerous exam safe. Not wanting to be left out, Amy said he could ask her too. She explained that the teachers would prepare an open area with no obstacles. When Sharon asked where they could find a place like that, Amy pointed up. The training ground would be the mounds. Sina added up the traceworthy erase from one peak to another. Sharon let out a nervous laugh. Sure, there were no walls to hit, but one bad move and you could fall to your death. Amy asked what decided the winner. She explained that first place goes to whoever reaches the finish line first. If no one makes it, then they count the farthest distance traveled. The course would start at the easiest level to lower the risk. Even so, the teachers were still worried. If the students got too desperate to win, they might start attacking each other. That made Amy realize Shirin would be an easy target. Shirin, meanwhile, wondered whether they could really do this. The hard part didn't scare him as much as facing the whole class alone. And if someone got hurt because of this, could he really accept it? Shirin broke his train of thought and admitted she had wanted him in the 5th grade from the start. But her own ambition may have made things worse. Shirin quickly told her it wasn't her fault. Then she said she would train him herself from now on. Amy immediately tensed up and asked why the teacher was taking it that far. Shirin said she was only trying to make up for how unfair this exam was, and wanted to help how she could. Amy argued that would only make that worse, especially with an exam this important. If anyone found out Shirin was training Shirin, his chances would drop even more. So Amy declared she would train him instead. If the course was set to level 1, she was the best person for it. Both Shirin and Sina were stunned, mostly because Amy had somehow stopped being angry. Sina then asked if Amy really had time for this, when she was trying to pass the upper exam early. Shirin was surprised too, because the graduating class was the point where students started stammering about the rest. Those were the points recommended to become poor magicians. Their level was treated as almost professional already, and because they studied at a famous school, even the Royal Academy of Magic magazine wrote about them. But once you reached that class, easy living was over. After that came non-stop rivalry and brutal training. Amy had wanted to get there before anyone else in the academy. Shirin kept questioning her, and her face turned red when he asked if she was pushing herself too soon. Amy shot back that it was his fault. He was improving so fast that graduation was the only place she could stay ahead of him. To Shirin, she was improving. He thought Amy was amazing for Amy to be number 1 in the upper classes. She wasn't scared of what came after, and even with all that pressure, she still came to help him. Watching her talk with Sana and insist on helping moved him. Sana still argued that since this would be Shirin's first time learning magic, a teacher should handle it. Amy refused to back down. She stepped right up to Shirin and told him to choose who would train him. He stared at her, shocked, while she pressed him. Her or the teacher? Instead, Shirin said he would do it on his own. The answer stemmed both of them, and Amy asked if he understood what a huge chance he was throwing away. Shirin said he didn't want to become anyone's burden. They both had important roles in this exam, and Sana would even be one of the examiners. Amy argued that everyone else would hire tutors to learn the spell, and the whole class was already against him, so why make things even harder by training alone? Shirin said he knew all that. He also knew Amy wanted to reach the upper class early because she couldn't just sit still with a future like that waiting for her. Then he told her that the 5th grade was his stit to become a magician, just like it had been for her. He asked her to trust him. He couldn't promise he would succeed, but he wanted to give it everything he had so he wouldn't regret his choice. Sana smiled and said that if that was her student's wish, she would accept it. She told him to come to her anytime he had questions. On her way out, she also told the two of them to finish talking, and Amy to stop sneaking into the boys' dorm. After Sana left, Amy sat on Shirin's bed and let out a long breath. Then it hit her. She was alone in his room, practically on his bed. She was silent it was time to leave. When she reached the window, Shirin thanked her for coming all the way to see him. Amy asked why he had been avoiding her. If someone was hurting him, he should have told her. This wasn't just his problem anymore. It was theirs. Remembering what her friend had said about his pride, she gently asked if that was why he kept quiet. Shirin answered that he just didn't want to leave her behind. Amy's heart jumped, thinking he meant he liked her. Then he ruined the moment by saying he didn't want to lose sight of her because she was his high school girl. Amy froze, but he kept going. Ever since he came to the academy, he'd sidered Amy to tap. He wanted to catch up to her. He never thought things between them would become this awkward, and if he had also told her he was being mocked, it would have felt even stranger. Amy paused and thought back to why she had come to this magic academy in the first place. Then she snapped, rushed at him, and pointed a finger in his face. Was he serious? Why did he keep calling her high school girl with a straight face? Shirin had no idea why she was so fired up. Amy moved to the window and told him that if he really wanted to surpass her, he had to stop calling her that. Only then would they be on equal ground, and if he failed, he'd call her senior for the rest of his life. Right then, Shirin called her by name, Amy. She was stunned by how suddenly he said it. When she turned back, she saw his eyes full of confidence as he told her he would definitely catch up. Amy smiled and told him he'd better hurry, because by then she'd probably have already graduated from the academy. Watching Amy leave through the window, our hero thought it would have been nice if she had taught him something, but he already knew every move he made was being watched, and whatever he earned he had to earn alone. The early transfer exam was just a month away. The next day after class, the students were all talking about the exam, and how some had already hired tutors. It would be about 20 people taking it. Our hero was worth it. He carried a pile of theory books because he planned to study on his own. The only problem left was the practical part. In real life, a mage's surroundings are always changing, but teleportation needs exact info about the place. If the location shifts, the amount of omnipotence and light has to change too, and those calculations only held for 10 minutes across 20 square meters. It sounded impossible. Still, our hero reminded himself, the teachers wouldn't give students a test. No one gives self. Even though Shirin had said teleportation was Punitgizer's warn, that didn't help much. He had never studied magic before, while 7th graders probably could do it already. They had trained since childhood with the best tutors money could buy. What mattered now was whether he could close that gap. Then he remembered the answer. The principal had already given him long ago, back when he was a child near that tree. Right in front of him was a student training for the same teleportation test. His teacher praised him for managing to teleport. It was Mark, a 7th grader. Mark's 9th-ranked teacher said he was teleport, for mastering it would take her for a month. Still, if he finished the exam material and spent the rest of the time practicing, he should pass. Mark was irritated. Because of our hero, he now had a shot at skipping 2 grades, so he asked what our hero was doing. His servant reported back. He was watching him like ordered. Our hero wasn't training with anyone, just studying from books. That confused Mark. He assumed someone with connections would find a top tutor, or maybe he was faking it. So he told the servant to keep watching. He didn't believe books alone keep enough. Meanwhile, our hero hit Millie on everything he planned. He had memorized all the required theory, even if he still doubted himself, and time was almost gone. He went to a training ground and started trying teleportation. There was no other choice. Now, he just had to trust his calculations. First, he rebuilt the theory using the zone. After all, the one standing between omniscience and omnipotence was him, so all he had to do was erase himself from between them. When that worked, he moved on to teleporting his own body. But a person can't just calculate the needed amount of light by force. When a mage focuses, the mind grows sharp enough to sense everything nearby. They say truly great mages can count leaves on a distant tree. Since everything a magician feels becomes part of the zone, our hero realized he only had to sense all of it. That let him grasp what he couldn't before. The puzzle was solved, and he had likely found the skill. There was almost no time left before the teleportation exam. Our hero was covered in injuries, and the other students wondered if Shiram was really training without protection. That was when it became clear. If first teleportation achievements would fail badly, to frictions mistakes, he had no choice but to keep risking it. He kept crashing as the days passed. He got hurt over and over, but never stopped. Even in class, he was still running numbers. He tested, wrote, thought, failed, and tried again. All he wanted was for his body to remember the process. Then the exam was only 1 day away. After another fall, he realized that every time he fixed one mistake, another appeared. But now he couldn't adjust anything else. It had to work. So he steadied himself in cast teleportation. It had to work, even if he still stumbled a little. But that alone wouldn't be enough. He didn't even get a chance to rest. Now he needed to practice linking the spell together. He meant to keep going, but exhaustion won, and he fell asleep on the floor. Then we cut back to Mark, feeling great. Today he thought would be the day he made history and entered the 5th grade. To him, 700 meters was nothing. At school, Mark ran into Maria near the classroom and asked if she was skipping the exam. She got flustered and asked what he was skacking about. Why was he outside? Mark shot back that someone like him didn't need to worry about passing. Then he mocked her for standing by the door and said someone with grades like hers should at least go watch what was happening outside. She tried to wish him luck, but Mark cut her off, saying she was probably laughing because she was the teacher's little rat. She didn't get how he knew, but he had only been baiting her, and she gave herself away. He said everyone already thought she was weird and quiet, so it was no surprise she had been snitching. Mark even shoved her against the wall. He said it had been nice on it because they were classmates. Then asked if she knew what would happen once he reached high school. Seeing she was completely shaken, he finally walked off. He couldn't understand why a coward like her wanted to be a magician at all. Maria was left there in tears. Mark entered the classroom and asked if the plan was ready. The others said yes. 2 would stick to Shiran at the start, and 2 more would block him after that. They'd have 2 chances to take our hero out. Mark ordered them to hold him back during the first stage, where the jump was 10 meters, until at least 10 students had gone hard. Some of them wanted with Mark orderly key his promises. He swore he would. His father was a technical advisor for the Association of Magicians, so if they helped him now, he'd get them tutors and support them however he could. In his mind, the plan was set. At that moment, all the 7th grade classes had gathered on the mountain. No one expected such a big crowd, especially from the 5th grade. They were all curious about any new student who might join them. All the test takers were there too, and the teacher decided it was time. The exam for the 21 applicants would begin. A lot of students had come to watch, and many were shocked by how the test ended. Even Cheyenne and Amy showed up. Amy wondered why they were there when only 7th graders were taking it, but Cheyenne said she came to cheer for her boyfriend so he could score enough points. Amy said the ones meant to pass would pass, and the ones who weren't ready would fail, but she still wondered whether our hero could actually teleport. Just then, Mark asked where our hero was. only to hear that he hadn't shown up at all. In truth, our hero was still asleep where he had collapsed. Amy noticed he really was missing, and Carl started worrying too because he couldn't find him anywhere. And Amy had perhaps thought, what if our hero never learned teleportation at all? She instantly regretted not forcing herself to teach him. Teachers and students got ready as the instructor explained the test. At the signal, they would teleport across the abyss, and whoever reached the greatest distance would win. That terrified the students. If they failed to reach the other side, they would fall. When they asked about safety measures, Teacher Ted told them that if they were scared, they should quit now. Anyone studying magic should already know. People die while learning it. This was early time to prove the fifth quid. If they couldn't protect themselves, they shouldn't have come. Ted was pleased to see so many freeze up. Still, he knew the real threats were the students who wanted to compete seriously. Mark's classmates laughed at the others for signing up without even knowing if they could survive the course. Mark imagined those same people begging him for help later. But what interested him most was whether the rumor was true, that the connected kid had really studied teleportation alone. Looks like he had failed. Mark was satisfied either way, since his plan was ready. Then the teacher told everyone to load up. The exam was starting. But suddenly, she spotted our hero sprinting along the edge of the forest. He was running at full speed and everyone turned in shock. He rushed up and asked if he could still take the test. At the same time, Amy snatched the binoculars from Carl and demanded to know where our hero was. Then she saw him, covered in injuries. Had he really been training with no protection? Sina's teacher asked to delay the test a bit, but the principal refused. He said the students were responsible for themselves before the exam, so it restarted in time. The teacher announced that the exam was beginning. She still gave our hero one last chance to back out, but he said he was fine and ready. The moment Mark saw him, he knew they had to make him fail within the first 10 jumps. The timer started, and everyone tensed up. Then they took off. It was clear they had trained hard for this, but this was their first real run over a cliff, with empty sky below them. All that mattered was getting ahead, so they charged straight for the edge. Mark knew speed alone wouldn't win. The key was timing each jump right. After 3 seconds, it was only 5 meters from the cliff. The first straightened started teleporting. Others lost their nerve, including some from Mark's group. He looked down on them, though even he felt some pressure. Our hero never slowed down. He knew it still wasn't time to jump. Everyone thought he had waited too long. Then instead of teleporting, he leaped straight off the cliff. That matched what Shireen once told Ryan. Fear comes from imagining your death before it happens. If you jump, you don't die until you hit the ground. So focus on the moment in front of you. That's how you'd find a way out. Ryan never really got what Shireen meant. To him, jumping out of a cloak just meant dying. And now our hero had done exactly that. He knew he couldn't pass out, or his zone would collapse. Then Mark realized our hero had already passed him, even though he jumped later. In a second, he stunned everyone. Carl was speechless, especially after Amy said this was the first time our hero had used magic. Even Amy was shocked. He had started late, but he still had a real shot. At this pace, Shireen could easily take first. Mark couldn't understand where his own team had gone, and Shireen was still had. Bloden was Marie Erlin, someone born with real magic talent. She remembered how her grades kept dropping because she was bullied in class, and adults brushed it off as normal competition. That's why she had been stuck in 7th grade for 6 years. She hated bullying most of all, so she refused to let Mark win. By the end of the 3rd phase, the students had split into 3 groups. Mark and Sheeran led the front pack. A second group trailed by about 3 meters, and behind them were the students who panicked and cast too early. Some of them couldn't even fly properly. The teachers weren't surprised. Students who lose to fear are usually the first to fail. When they dropped to the bottom, they realized they wouldn't die from the fall. The whole last group failed, and many from the middle group went out too. Mark accepted that much. What bothered him was that Shireen had widened the gap and still didn't look tired. He couldn't figure it out, because at the start, our hero looked like he might collapse. Instead, he kept getting faster. The teachers noticed he was using compulsion and repeating the same pattern with machine-like precision. At the same time, Mark's moves looked shaky, which stood out because he was supposed to be the best in his class. Sina and the principal were impressed, but Ted still refused to admit our hero was truly talented. Sariel knew did too, and couldn't understand how he learned with such an advanced method. Emmy realized he had taught himself. Most mages learn to control that hidden area on purpose, but our hero was different, like he could use it naturally, something that usually can't be taught. By then, Mark was running out of stamina, so he shouted for everyone to move. At once, the others made their move to drain our hero's focus. He noticed right away that something was off. His rhythm was broken when one student suddenly cut in front of him. That guy knew he was risking himself too, and was ready to fall with our hero. Our hero realized who was brilliant Telganen, but the Azakra missed. Our hero dodged, and the other boy started falling instead. Even so, the disruption wrecked our hero's flow, and all his built-up fatigue hit at once. He knew he couldn't black out, so he forced himself to focus and recover. The 5th graders watching were stunned by the strange movement from the 7th graders. One student explained it was intentional. One blocked our hero's path while another came from the side. It was a tactic made to shut down both strengths of teleportation. It cut off instant movement and interdimensional jumping. If Sharon hadn't reacted in time, something terrible could happened. A skilled fighter might avoid it with movement stabilization. But the 5th graders still thought the attacker had gone too far. They also believed the teachers should have been ready for something like this. Meanwhile, Mark pushed ahead, sure he had taken first place. He was already imagining himself beating everyone, even 6th graders, and calling himself a genius. Our hero saw Mark was still in strong shape, so to beat him, he had to get ahead without breaking his own pattern. Instead of stretching his teleport farther, he chose to move faster and gain has taken Mark. The crowd started picking sides as they watched our hero pass him. Amy, though, knew his body was already in bad shape, and that pushing more magic was dangerous. Then something suddenly grabbed Mark. At that moment, the uncrossable bridge system activated. A level 10 obstacle appeared. Ted rushed to the control room. There was no way level 10 should have been triggered. Sina said they had to stop the exam, but another teacher argued this test decided advancement by 2 levels. If they canceled it, the families would they fear youths. The principal cut them off and demanded to know why that was even being debated right now. He ordered them to send the stop signal immediately. While flying over, Ted saw the notice that the exam had been halted. He knew a mountain of trouble was about to land on him. He reached the control room door, but it was locked. That told him this wasn't an accident. He tried opening it with magic, then sensed with his zone that someone was inside. He warned them to open up or he'd blow the door apart. A voice answered that it didn't matter. No one would care if she just cared anyway. Ted looked at Maria. She was crying. He told her she had no idea how serious this was, and begged her to open the door. He promised that if she fixed it now, the punishment would be light. Maria refused. She believed everything was already over. If Mark transferred, she said, she'd be sent back to hell, and that life was no better than death. She kept repeating it until Ted realized forcing her might only make things worse, so he changed his tone and said she didn't have to open it right away. After all, the exam had already been stopped, just like she wanted. Mark couldn't believe the tops had been cut off so like to transfer. Still, he knew he had to win now. He might never get another chance to get rid of our hero, so he and our hero headed straight into the labyrinth that had appeared. Sina was stunned they went in. Even the principal was shaken. He couldn't understand why they kept fighting. Just pride? He ordered someone to act before it got even more dangerous. Sina yelled, asking what teacher Ted was doing. But the principal kept watching our hero, thinking there was something different about him. If he rushed in blinded by greed, he'd never find the right path in aligned with. The students watched in blind silence. They couldn't believe those two had entered the 10th level, a placement for pros. Our hero saw the trap spreading, and they were moving too fast for him. He barely had time to dodge one, let alone plan for the next. At this rate, he'd burned through all his mental strength. Mark kept charging through the maze, convinced they'd both get eliminated anyway. So to him, the only thing that mattered was getting farther than the other. If he could amaze everyone here, his talent would finally be recognized. He pushed ahead, thinking Sharon had to be shocked by his skill. Meanwhile, Maria stayed by the tour, still asking what this competition was really for. Was it just about tricking your rival into failing while you climb higher yourself? Was that really what the academy wanted? Ted told her that wasn't the point at all. Maria wouldn't budge. She said he shouldn't sugarcoat it. What else would a praised genius say? She had done everything a teacher told her, stayed patient, and still the academy only cared about gifted students. She was just ordinary. Ted said he had gone through the same academy, but when she first came there and he was a senior, Jude asked if she'd ever heard of the senior's Ted. She hadn't, and that when he was. He said he was always at the bottom and got stuck in 5th grade for 5 whole years. That was when he started getting angry, watching his friends move ahead without him. Maria didn't buy it, but Ted kept going. He said even the principal had caught him once and chewed him out after he got into a fight. Ted hadn't wanted to explain himself, but the headmaster told him a wizard should never compare himself to others. A wizard has to erase his ego and focus on himself. Only then can he truly move forward. If he keeps running while looking back at everyone else, he'll lose his way. At the sea movement, Mark looked ahead and saw the path was blocked. Right away he realized flying in had been a mistake. He thought he was about to die and started screaming for help. Watching him fall, the others shut their eyes. Then our hero swooped in from above and caught him. Everyone saw him save Mark. They were stunned. He had just rescued his own rival. Winning should have come first, yet our hero chose something else. Even while being carried, Mark kept yelling for help. Our hero told him to be quiet. He needed to think. From where he understood, he's twapped from the cane of maze, and the only way out was to study the pattern from a distance. He rose to get a better look, but the trap followed him. The other students noticed that too, so he realized going higher was pointless, and dropped back down instead. The students saw that as well, and they were still amazed he had managed this much alone. Had they all judged him wrong? Then the whole crowd started cheering him on, and Serial could hardly believe what she was seeing. Amy understood it. Now Sharon wasn't studying just to pass tests. He wanted to understand magic itself. At the same time, Ted told Maria that competition was only meant to help people reach the goal faster. Goines told he was fine too. Once they crossed the finish line, they were still magicians. Maria broke down in tears, realizing it wasn't over, and Ted would stand by her. After seeing everything, the principal ordered the exam to continue, and said he'd take full responsibility. Our hero focused harder, and realized the trap moved like it was alive. Its pattern was too chaotic to predict, and carrying Mark only made things worse. Mark was still screaming the whole time. Ignoring him, our hero knew he had to feel the structure of the whole time. He had done something like this before. It was almost like pure evasion through instinct, so he suddenly sped up and followed the trap's own path. He moved so fast that Mark passed out. The director couldn't understand it. He knew danger could push a person's power higher, but most people hit a limit once they feel satisfied or driven by desire. In our hero, he sensed neither. Did that mean he had no limit at all? Another teacher noticed something even stranger. Our hero wasn't focusing on any one thing. His mind was empty, with no extra thoughts, and the density of his zone was nearly 99.9%. In that trance-like state, he could even calculate his own movement. The teacher knew Sharon was talented, but this time he was in real danger. Still, our hero thought only about breaking through the labyrinth. The gaps between obstacles were under 1 meter, and he knew he couldn't teleport 10 full meters at once. So he split the distance into tiny parts, calculating each move in an instant, and blinking forward like lightning. Then another obstacle appeared in front of him, one he knew he couldn't simply dodge. The opening was too small, so he tried to force his way through it and prank-podged it. No one understood what he was doing. Only one student tried to explain. If you divide a circle into enough parts, it becomes an endless straight line, then split the distance down to thousands. Still, nobody could believe anyone could calculate that. But the student said it wasn't really calculation. It was more like clairvoyance. That made everyone realize just how unreal our hero's ability was. Genius didn't even seem like a big enough word. He kept moving forward, but then another labyrinth, the teachers call it the Dragon's Labyrinth, appearing before them. Sina ran over to Ted, but at that exact moment, Mark woke up. His hands were shaking with fear, while our hero tried to remember the order in which the labyrinth had formed. He knew he had to move through the exact positions he had seen. Mark, though, wasn't joking around. He even said Sharon should just let him go. By then, Sina had already reached Ted and shouted, asking what he had been doing this whole time. Ted calmly said there had been a problem. Sina snapped back that the device had to be stopped right now. Ted didn't understand at first, until she told him Mark and Sharon were sad. Then a third teacher rushed in and said our hero was already right in front of the jaws. Sweat ran down his face, but before the jaws closed, Sharon forced himself to calm down. He was still alive. He started making choices in 1/10 of a second. In 100th, he mapped out every place he might need to appear. Then in 1,000th, he realized that plan was wrong. He tried to find another way, but the next instant, the jaws had already shut. Everyone thought our hero had died. They couldn't bear to watch. The director believed he had made a terrible mistake, but our hero had finally etched. No one could believe he made it through. They stared at him like he was a ghost. Even our hero wasn't sure what had happened. He didn't know if he'd really found the way out, because he could barely remember any of it. At the same time, Ted shut the system down and reset it to level 0. The students kept staring, unable to understand how our hero had cleared level 10. How stage was meant for advanced students, basically professionals. And after all that, he didn't cry or brag. He just admitted he honestly thought he was going to die. Carl bragged at Amy's place, saying our hero really made it through, but Amy just thought he looked kind of cool. People who survive by giving everything they have don't usually show off after. Soon everyone crowded around our hero, calling him amazing. They shouted that he had cleared something 2 classes above his level. The 6th years were definitely going to be jealous. When Sina arrived with Ted, she could hardly believe it either, that our hero had actually made it. Ted asked her to understand that he had done all he could, but Sina yelled that he hadn't done anything at all. Still, she pointed out that both racers finished at the same time, so the principal needed to decide who really won. The director, though, was lost in thought. Did the result even matter now? More than anything, he was grateful to our hero for showing him a light he hadn't seen in a long time. Tian looked at the headmaster and remembered that the Milt family was known for photon and light magic, honored even by the royal family. But the greed rising in him again came from only one thing, Sharon's incredible talent. Tian stood closer, and then manga shimmering friendly appeared to spark a new fire to their academy. The headmaster was just as moved by the performance. Watching our hero had stirred old memories in him. Back then, he had been unbelievably greedy and never believed in fate. It had been far too long since his heart had pounded like this. Then the director stepped out before the students and announced that only one person would pass. He asked them to applaud the one who gave them courage and might one day lead the world. The student who passed the test was our hero. At that moment, Mark was back on his feet, and everyone expected him to demand a reveal since he and Sharon had arrived together. Mark couldn't understand it. He had seen for himself that Sharon was a real genius. He walked up to Sharon, admitted he had been wrong the whole time, and asked for forgiveness. As a mage, he also confessed his part in what happened. Sharon looked at him and said he should take whatever punishment he thought was right. Everyone thought Sharon looked scary then, but really he was just exhausted. All he wanted was to sleep. Sariel and Amy were about to leave, and Amy felt this wasn't the right time to approach him. He had already proved everything. But then Sharon noticed Amy, not fully thinking straight. He called out that he had proved himself, and said he'd catch up with her later. That made everyone jealous of Amy, and she turned red. But there was one more problem. Sharon remembered nothing. When he woke up, his memory was gone. After that, he was moved up to the 5th grade. Even so, the teachers still wondered how he made it through the labyrinth. Did the dragon maid somehow let him pass? Then the students and teachers were called to a council. A lot of them spoke against Maria's punishment, but the other kids quickly admitted they were guilty too, and confessed everything they had done to stop Sharon's exam. The case became much more serious. Still, Maria said she would keep her promise and take full responsibility. One teacher said he felt sorry for her because of her bad situation. And even if she hadn't acted with the goal of hurting anyone, the headmaster knew the school rules still required punishment. Sharon then said he should be punished too because he ignored the order to stop the exam and entered the maze anyway. He also kept going through dangerous ground and brought Mark along with him, even if he felt he had no other choice. The principal and the others never thought they'd see something like this at the school. Kids who had been blinded by rivalry, pride, and envy were now admitting their mistakes themselves, trying to become better magicians, who was the very lesson the principal had wanted the teachers to prize on. When the final decision was announced, many people broke down and cried. Maria especially couldn't hold it in. To many of the teachers, this was even more shocking than everything before, because a ruling like this had never happened. In the end, everyone involved was punished. Mark and Maria were suspended for 2 months, while the other students got 1 month. Even Sharon was punished. He had to write a letter of remorse for rushing into the maze after seeing the exam had already failed. Sharon understood why he did it. He simply didn't want to lose. And even if he had remembered it clearly, he knew he had been set on clearing the maze. His teacher realized he was far more aggressive than he looked. Even though he seemed gentle on the outside, that wasn't the whole truth. While Sharon slept, he had a nightmare about the maze and all the eyes staring at him, like everything was chasing him. Then he heard piano music and suddenly woke up. It was morning, so he figured he should hurry to class. Later, he picked some apples and brought some to Amy too, but after looking at her notes, she got flustered and ran off. A month later, people's attitude toward Sharon had changed. Amy still acted like she was ignoring him though, and even her friend wondered if they were really dating. She explained that Amy wanted to become a military officer because her specialty was precision shooting, and people with that skill were often sent on recon missions. That word, specialty, mattered a lot in 5th grade. From then on, students had to think of matter as their future job. Being the best at one thing made you more valuable, so people usually didn't look down on someone just for weak grades. While Sharon was thinking about that, now Akimura. His grades were average, but he was lively and could use lightning magic. As they talked, 2 intimidating students walked up. Sharon thought they wanted to discuss some hard subject, but instead they asked which teacher he liked better, Sena or Afella. It was such a weird question that Sharon figured people weren't avoiding him anymore. Nade asked if they really thought that was a hard one. Sharon was ready to agree it was a dumb question, but Nade quickly took Sena aside. The 3 of them started listing each teacher's good and bad points, and Sharon suddenly realized these were just normal school kids messing around. Then they asked for his answer too. He knew joining talks like this was part of having a normal school life, and he was about to say he liked both teachers, but the boys suddenly left. Sharon felt oddly disappointed, and Not said it was because Aruko was coming up behind him. Aruki and Aruko were the same person, someone Sharon had never met before. Aruki introduced himself as a 5th grade outcast, and Sharon realized it was the same voice that had guided him before, so he grabbed his hand and thanked him right away. Aruki only replied that he had expected him and more interested. Nade hurried to reply dies, saying Aruki always talks in riddles. Aruki said that was his way of praising Sharon, then warned him to be more careful than before. When they asked if he was skipping class, he just said he was bored. Nade sighed and said Aruki was always like that, but deep down he was reliable. Sharon said he seemed like a good person, and Nade cut in to explain that Aruki was a genius, just a very strange one. Right then, Aruki stepped forward and started muttering something bizarre. The next step he moved with insane speed. Everyone could tell something strange was happening. Aruki formed targets out of floating spheres and started firing at them, making them explode one after another. It scared everyone, but he calmly asked Sharon to meet him again later. Sharon was stunned by what he had just seen. Aruki could use both split form and detonation, his own specialty. What made it stranger was that he was known as the biggest loner in class, barely talked to anyone, and only had average grades. Still, people called him a genius because his skill in one area was unbelievable. Aruki was amazing at physical calculations. He could work out extreme conditions in his head, figure out dates 40,000 years ahead, or keep going with numbers like pi forever if he wanted. But outside science, he was hopeless. The teachers were stunned someone like that was even in 5th grade. Nade said teachers used to fight over who would take responsibility for a rookie, but by now they had all given up. Sharon and Nade were still excited by all this when a girl came over and invited Sharon to join their group. He turned her down and she told him to come if he changed his mind. The main reason to refuse was his terrible greeds. When he said that, Nade told him he led a group himself and could take Sharon in. Sharon expected something solid and dependable, but Nade brought him to the Storm, the place where the school kept healing materials. Nade explained that you could find almost anything in there. Sharon asked if that was even allowed, and Nade said the Storm changed its layout every time someone searched it, which meant no one could track what you found. Sharon actually liked the sound of that. Eventually they reached the room used by Nade's study group. For some reason it was called Ritual and Ghosts. Native joked that they didn't actually study ghosts, souls, the afterlife, aliens, God, or hell there. Sharon started to think he may have come for nothing, though he wasn't totally against it. As soon as he said that, Native kicked the door open. Dust flew everywhere, and inside was a rookie, the student from earlier who had been covering the board in chalk. Nate explained that because the group had a bad reputation, he hadn't told Sharon earlier that a rookie was one of the members. Sharon was surprised a rookie was interested and he had old. Sharon asks why a rookie was one of Clodoba's with stuff. Native says it's actually the opposite. A rookie came to tear those ideas apart and lowering people who think everything has a logical answer. A rookie is glad to see Sharon and wonders why a genius came to a place like this. Since he's here, a rookie says they can study big questions together, like whether an atom can be split. Sharon has no idea what to say, so he blurts out the first thing he can think of. A rookie says he already knows the answer. There has to be huge energy inside an atom. He goes on, saying Sharon is the Iran, because even if people at Earth had doesn't really matter. Sharon snaps back that no student should ever be harmed. He says that's exactly what the headmaster teaches, but a rookie just grabs one of the barriers on the table and says Sharon clearly doesn't understand magic, because every wizard acts by their own rules. That makes Sharon even more upset. He'd rather be a fool than some genius who hurts people. A rookie doesn't budge, arguing that a few geniuses always create crowds of fools. To him, history proves it, and what he hates most is blind idealism. Sharon would accept it. He says idealists can be real. Mady sees the argument getting out of hand and tries to stop them, but it's already too late. Sharon decides he won't get anything good from this club. Mady tries to hold him back, but Sharon is done. A rookie only makes things worse, since he treats Sharon like a rival. He keeps mocking him, saying he doesn't believe a genius like Sharon really exists, or that he can do everything in a split second. Mady is stunned, but a rookie looks thrilled and asks if Sharon can even win the speed test, coming up. By now, Sharon realizes this rivalry is coming to last. Wow. The speed test is an exam where students score points by hitting targets with active magic. Recovery and support magic can't attack, and you can only move on after clearing every target in a stage, so speed matters a lot. The problem is obvious. Sharon can't use active magic at all, which means he has no way to pass. He remembers that to reach omniscience magic, he needs at least 60 points. Still, his teacher is pleased because Sharon's study method raises his skill in every subject at once. Even still, his still one field where he hasn't reached an expert lesson, photon theory. Sharon hadn't thought of it that way, but now he gets excited. The teacher quickly hands him 2 books. He opens them right away, hoping he can master it fast, but soon realizes that even if he passes the test, this magic doesn't seem useful in practice. The teacher disagrees. She says photon magic only looks useless. It actually has huge potential, because light is the fastest thing in the world, and learning to control it matters. Researchers at the Advanced Tower believe photon power could transform how information is sent, and they're already posting ways to use it in fields people how an information had. That gets Sharon thinking. If light magic can start a whole new industry, then studying it could be amazing. So he heads outside to train, tries to cast it, and fails. He keeps trying over and over, but nothing works. The magic isn't supposed to come from his hands, but from the center of the spirit zone, and picturing that clearly is hard. While he's still struggling, a girl walks out nearby. People are stunned by how impressive she is, and by the fact that she just finished training. Sharon started to think he might not win. That evening, he sat alone in his room, thinking about the exam coming in 3 days. No matter what he tried, he still couldn't pass a rookie. Was this where he gave up? But then he remembered everything that had happened, and chose to believe again. Part of him even admitted a rookie was right. He simply couldn't quit now. To beat him, he had to go past numbers. So what were numbers really? What was the progression method at its core? He realized plate numbers meant method. If he stayed trapped in thought, he'd never see further. He had to feel it instead. How far could counting go? What came after the limit? He kept counting until something pulled him in. When he came back, 40 hours had passed, and test day had arrived. The room was packed. Even seniors came. Everyone was tense, because the real highlight was Aruka versus Sharon. People were betting, others were nervous, and soon it was time for Team 20, Shiran and Haruki. The hall went silent. Even Node, the teacher, could talentquanly come for these two. The mode the Techjourned. Both of them tore through targets at crazy speed. Most people were focused on Haruka's score, but Shiran's friend noticed Shiran was actually a little ahead. At first, everyone thought Haruka was playing around again, but he knew that wasn't true. This time he was going all out. So what had Shiran done in those last 3 days? The teacher understood it right away. The first time down a path feels long, but once it's opened you can move much faster. That applied to scores too, and Shiran had clearly gone somewhere far beyond knew. He was in Sharon. Shiran kept firing photons without slowing down, and the teacher saw the flaw in his strategy. He couldn't afford even a second of destruction. The crowd went wild as the pace kept rising, and even Haruka decided to use his brain's full power. That was when everyone noticed he had 2 zones. Even the teacher was stunned. How could anyone think and calculate that fast? Most people thought it was over. Amy had been right. Shiran was just unlucky. Shiran felt it too. Had he really hit his limit? Was there nothing more he could do? Had he ever done what was resulted in? Fear. He had to break past himself and think only about numbers. The instant that barrier gave way, a field spread out around him and wiped everything in its path. Everyone assumed Haruki would still win, but Haruki suddenly couldn't figure out why time felt so slow. When the test ended, he thought his 1247 points were enough. Instead, everyone rushed to Shiran. He had won and broken the record. Then Haruki walked over and offered his hand. He admitted defeat, said Shiran wasn't boring after all, and confessed Shiran had been right. Shiran could hardly believe it, but Haruki went on. If the charge stays controlled, nothing happens. Even if the shell breaks, someone has to take responsibility, and from now on, that person would be Shiran. Around them, people kept repeating Haruki's strange words about charges and control. Still, every particle has an opposite. So what was Shiran's opposite? Fear or strength? If anyone could stop a force like Haruki, it had to be him. Shiran believed him too, because he could see the fear in Haruki's eyes, so he shook his fear and improved to stop him if his power ever broke far. After that, Nade came over to celebrate with his friends, but the teacher soon pulled Shiran aside. She asked if he understood where he had gone. That place, she said, was dangerous. If you entered it, you could lose yourself. Some people called that state nirvana. Everyone knew a person could reach infinity, but those who reached it could also become nothing. Among it all, Shiran had seen a giant void pulling him in. He kept dreaming about that place afterward, and now his body felt strange too. The first thing he did was tell Nade and Haruka, and it felt like pulse the following him. They didn't know why he sounded so serious, but Haruka instantly leaned in. Had all of that really happened in his dream? The stars, the endless void, the thing vibrating at the end? If so, Haruka said, then maybe Shiran had seen a number that couldn't be calculated, something beyond space itself. Shiran had wondered the same thing. How could you dream of something you'd never seen? Then Nade said he'd heard stories from 200 years ago, people trying to move the soul through experiments. Those tests were supposed to be inhuman, but many who went through them claimed they remembered things they had never seen before. Some even swore it was real. While Nade was busy creeping Shiran out, Haruka said that actually explained everything. If Shiran's soul had been ionized by electricity and triggered a quantum effect, then maybe it really crossed beyond the cosmos. Haruka was talking about a world so tiny that maybe Shiran's soul had shrunk enough to slip into atoms. Shiran was blown away by the idea. Then Haruka told him to be honest. Could he finally Shiran really happen? Shiran told him everything, and Haruka burst out laughing in delight. He said his father had told him about this before, about a number that was the key to everything. After hearing that, Shiran decided to join the club. Nade was thrilled and said they should sign the papers right away. They planned to finish the paperwork in the cafeteria. No one expected Shiran to join their group or any club at all, but somehow, the most dangerous teacher heard about it, and that's where this part ends.
And that wraps up today's journey through the realm. If you enjoyed this tale, be sure to paint face and comment your favorite moment, and subscribe to become a true realm warrior.